This is the story of Adam Johnson, a loving husband and father whose life was tragically cut short in a deadly love triangle. Adam Johnson was a 29-year-old man who lived in Alpharetta, Georgia, with his wife Rebecca and their twin boys Modelo and Reno. Adam was an architect who loved designing buildings that were good for the environment. He wanted to help the planet by creating homes and offices that used less energy and were made from sustainable materials. Adam went to Georgia Tech and graduated with a degree in architecture. He was very proud of his education and often talked about how much he learned there. Adam was working on his first major project when he died. This project was very important to him because he believed it would help make the community a better place to live. Adam's dream was to create beautiful buildings that would last a long time and not harm the environment. He wanted his children to grow up in a world where they could enjoy clean air and natural beauty. He often told his friends about his plans and hopes for the future, sharing his vision of a better world. In the days before his death, Adam was very busy but also very excited. He was working late nights and early mornings to make sure his project was perfect. He often talked to his colleagues about new ideas and ways to improve his designs. He even stayed up late reading the latest architecture magazines to stay informed about new trends and technologies. Adam lived in a nice neighborhood in Alpharetta, where people knew each other and felt safe. He liked to jog in the mornings and was often seen at the local Starbucks, where he would get his favorite drink, a caramel macchiato. He also enjoyed watching football games on TV and was a big fan of the Georgia Bulldogs. Adam's personality and dreams made him a special person. He was loved by many and had big plans for the future. His dedication to his work and his family showed how much he cared about making the world a better place. Adam's tragic death was a shock to everyone who knew him, as it ended the life of a man who had so much more to give. On August 15, 2013, at around 9:00 a.m., the body of Adam Johnson was discovered in his home in Alpharetta, Georgia. The person who found him was his neighbor, Josephus Matthews. Josephus often checked in on the Johnson family because they were good friends and lived next door. That morning, Josephus noticed that the front door of the Johnson house was slightly open, which seemed strange. Feeling uneasy, he decided to go inside and see if everything was okay. As Josephus entered the house, he called out Adam's name, but there was no answer. He walked through the hallway and into the living room, where he made a horrific discovery. Adam was blindfolded and tied to a chair, with multiple stab wounds all over his body. The room was a mess with blood on the floor and walls, indicating a violent struggle had taken place. Josephus was in shock and couldn't believe what he was seeing. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone to call 911. The operator answered, and Josephus tried to stay calm as he described what he had found. His voice trembled, but he managed to give the operator all the necessary details. He said, "I'm at my neighbor's house and he's been stabbed. He's tied to a chair, and there's blood everywhere. Please send help quickly." The police arrived at the scene within minutes. They found Josephus standing in the hallway, visibly shaken. The officers asked Josephus to wait outside while they secured the scene. As they moved through the house, they noted the signs of a struggle and the violent nature of the attack. The paramedics arrived soon after the police and confirmed that Adam was dead. Josephus was asked to give a statement about what he had seen and how he had found Adam. He described how he had entered the house, found the body, and immediately called 911. Josephus was still in shock and had a hard time processing what had happened. He kept repeating, "I can't believe this. Adam was such a good man." The news of Adam's death spread quickly through the neighborhood. People were shocked and saddened to hear that such a kind and caring person had been murdered in such a brutal way. The local news stations like WSB-TV began reporting on the crime, and the community was left in a state of fear and disbelief. The discovery of Adam Johnson's body marked the beginning of a tragic and complex investigation. On the morning of August 15, 2013, the Alpharetta police quickly arrived at the scene where Adam Johnson's body was found. Brother and sister police team officers Clarissa Brown and Dean Davis were among the first responders. They were known for their thoroughness and dedication. Officer Brown, a seasoned detective with a calm demeanor, and Officer Davis, a younger but highly observant officer, were both shocked by the brutality of the scene. The crime scene was in Adam's living room. Blood was splattered across the floor and walls, and it was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. Adam was found blindfolded and tied to a chair with multiple stab wounds. The most severe wound was a single fatal stab to the heart. This indicated that the attack was personal and not a random act of violence. The detectives began their investigation by securing the crime scene and making sure no evidence was disturbed. They used yellow crime scene tape to cordon off the area and started taking photographs of the scene from every angle. They collected samples of the blood found at the scene, hoping to find DNA evidence that could lead them to the killer. Officer Brown noticed a partially burned note in the fireplace. She carefully retrieved it with tweezers and placed it in an evidence bag. The note appeared to be a letter from Adam, expressing his intention to leave his wife Rebecca and take custody of their children. This piece of evidence suggested a possible motive for the crime. The detectives also used luminol to check for any hidden bloodstains. Luminol is a chemical that glows when it comes into contact with blood, even if the blood has been cleaned up. They found more bloodstains leading from the living room to the kitchen, indicating that the struggle might have started there. Officer Davis checked the doors and windows for signs of forced entry but found none. This suggested that Adam knew his attacker and had let them into the house willingly. The police also dusted for fingerprints and collected any that they found, hoping to match them to a suspect. The police worked tirelessly to gather all possible evidence. They interviewed neighbors, including Josephus Matthews, who had discovered the body. Josephus described Adam as a friendly and caring person who had no known enemies. This made the crime even more puzzling. As the day turned into night, the police continued their investigation, determined to find justice for Adam Johnson. The crime scene was gruesome, and the detectives knew they had a tough case ahead. They hoped the evidence they gathered would lead them to the person responsible for this horrific crime. Rebecca Johnson, Adam's 27-year-old wife, was the first suspect in the investigation. Rebecca was known for being creative and outgoing, with a vibrant social life. However, her relationship with Adam had been strained for some time. Friends and family mentioned that she seemed unhappy and distant, and rumors about her having an affair were common. Rebecca was a part-time artist who enjoyed painting and attending local art events. Raised Methodist, she was also recently involved with a group called Zen and Philosophy. This group claimed to be a spiritual community, with its teachings based on the 1999 Disney Channel original movies and a girl of the 21st century. Others simply called it a cult. Well, we'll let you decide.
Hello, I am Maureen Zaftrapines, agent of Lady Zinnan Carr. Today I invite you to explore Xenon philosophy, a futuristic vision and a prophecy of humanity's evolution towards cosmic enlightenment. Through chanting of Lord Protozo's sacred lyrics, we attune our souls to the cosmic frequencies, preparing ourselves for the journey towards higher realms of existence. Our sacred branding of the letter Z symbolizes our commitment to Xenon philosophy as we embark on the path of spiritual enlightenment. We are not just individuals, but a cosmic community united by our shared vision. As we journey towards the stars, let us embrace the teachings of the Xenon philosophy, for within its wisdom lies the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe and the boundless potential of our souls. May the light of Lady Xenon guide us on our cosmic voyage. Cetus Lupitus.
Anyway, Rebecca's sudden interest in Xenon philosophy worried her friends and family. They felt she was becoming more withdrawn and influenced by the group's teachings. When the police questioned Rebecca, she appeared anxious and evasive. She admitted that her marriage to Adam was troubled and confessed to having an affair with Jimmy Lewis Carter, a 23-year-old ex-football player at Georgia Tech. Rebecca explained that she met Jimmy through Xenon philosophy and that they had become close. She bluntly said Jimmy was much better in bed than her husband. Despite this admission, Rebecca denied any involvement in Adam's murder. During the interrogation, Rebecca's nervousness was evident. She fidgeted with her hands and avoided eye contact with the detectives. Officer Brown asked Rebecca about the night of the murder, but her answers were vague and inconsistent. Rebecca claimed she was at home alone, which the police found suspicious given the nature of her relationship with Adam. The detectives also questioned Rebecca about the partially burned note found in the fireplace. The note indicated that Adam planned to leave her and take their children, Modelo and Reno. When asked about this, Rebecca became visibly upset and started to cry. She insisted that she did not know about Adam's plans and that she would never harm him. The police searched Rebecca's phone and computer, looking for any clues. They found numerous text messages between her and Jimmy, discussing their relationship and their dissatisfaction with their current lives. However, there was no direct evidence linking Rebecca to the murder. Rebecca's involvement with Zin and philosophy also raised questions. The group had a reputation for encouraging extreme behavior among its members. The detectives wondered if the group's influence had played a role in Adam's death. They decided to investigate further, looking into the activities and teachings of Zin and philosophy. Despite her nervous demeanor and inconsistent statements, there was not enough concrete evidence to arrest Rebecca at that time. The police continued to investigate other leads and suspects, hoping to find the truth behind Adam Johnson's tragic death. Jimmy Lewis Carter, a 23-year-old ex-football player at Georgia Tech, was the second suspect in Adam Johnson's murder case. Known for his charisma and athleticism, Jimmy had a history of short-term relationships. He was identified as Rebecca Johnson's lover and was the one who introduced her to the Xenon philosophy group. This group, often considered a cult, had a significant influence on both Rebecca and Jimmy. When the police brought Jimmy in for questioning, he appeared calm and confident. His relaxed demeanor contrasted sharply with the serious nature of the investigation. Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis conducted the interview, hoping to learn more about his relationship with Rebecca and his possible involvement in Adam's death. Jimmy was cooperative and answered all the questions without hesitation. He admitted to having an affair with Rebecca and confirmed that they met through Zin and philosophy. Jimmy described Rebecca as someone who was unhappy in her marriage and looking for something more in life. He claimed that their relationship was purely emotional and physical, with no intention of causing harm to anyone. Detective Brown asked Jimmy about his whereabouts on the night of August 14, 2013. Jimmy confidently stated that he was with a friend at a local Longhorn steakhouse and provided the names of several friends who could confirm his alibi. The police followed up on this information and found that his alibi checked out. Jimmy was indeed at practice, far from the scene of the crime. Despite his solid alibi, the detectives pressed Jimmy further, trying to uncover any additional information. They asked him about Zen and philosophy and its influence on him and Rebecca. Jimmy explained that Zen and philosophy was about finding inner peace and spiritual enlightenment. He denied that the group had any radical or violent teachings. The detectives also asked Jimmy about the text messages between him and Rebecca. The messages showed their dissatisfaction with their current lives and hinted at plans for the future. Jimmy explained that they were just talking about their dreams and aspirations, not planning anything harmful. Throughout the interrogation, Jimmy remained composed and dismissive of the police's suspicions. He showed no signs of guilt or nervousness, which made the detectives wonder if he was telling the truth or just a very good liar. However, without concrete evidence linking him to the crime, they had no choice but to let him go. As Jimmy left the police station, the detectives continued to feel uneasy. His confidence and cooperation were unusual for someone under suspicion of such a serious crime. While they could not detain him, Jimmy remained a person of interest in the investigation. The police continued to gather evidence, hoping to find the truth behind Adam Johnson's tragic death. On August 20, 2013, 5 days after Adam Johnson's body was found, the Alpharetta police received a crucial tip. It was a hot, humid afternoon when a local resident called the station. She had found something suspicious while walking her dog, Michael Cartino Winchester, in a nearby park. The park was a popular spot in Alpharetta, known for its scenic trails and family-friendly atmosphere. Emma described finding a bloody knife hidden under some bushes near the edge of the park. The knife seemed out of place, and she immediately thought it might be connected to Adam's murder. Officer Dean Davis and Detective Clarissa Brown rushed to the park to investigate the tip. They arrived at the scene and carefully retrieved the knife, placing it in an evidence bag to avoid contamination. Back at the police station, forensic experts examined the knife. They discovered traces of Adam's blood on the blade and a partial fingerprint on the handle. The fingerprint was sent to the lab for analysis. The detectives hoped it would match someone in their database or one of their suspects. The discovery of the knife was a significant breakthrough in the case. The police felt a renewed sense of urgency as they waited for the lab results. 2 days later, on August 22, the lab results came back. The fingerprint on the knife matched Karen Blanchard, Rebecca Johnson's best friend, and a member of Xenon philosophy. Karen was known for her aggressive behavior and strong loyalty to Rebecca. The police immediately brought her in for questioning. The discovery of the knife and the fingerprint evidence put Karen under intense scrutiny. The police believed they were closer to solving the case, but they needed more information to piece everything together. They continued to investigate Karen's involvement, hoping to uncover the full truth behind Adam Johnson's murder. Karen Blanchard, Rebecca Johnson's best friend, became a primary suspect after her fingerprint was found on the knife used to kill Adam Johnson. Karen, a 28-year-old with a history of aggressive behavior, was fiercely protective of Rebecca. She was also an ex-lover of Jimmy Lewis Carter and a member of Xenon Philosophy. On August 22, 2013, after the fingerprint analysis, Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis brought Karen in for questioning. Karen, known for her strong-willed personality, initially tried to maintain her composure. However, the evidence against her was mounting, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. During the interrogation, Karen admitted to having sex with Rebecca but denied any involvement in Adam's murder. She claimed that the knife must have been planted to frame her. Detective Brown, with her calm and methodical approach, pressed Karen for more details about her activities on the night of August 14. Karen's story was inconsistent. She initially claimed to be at home alone, but later admitted to meeting with Rebecca and Jimmy. She described the meeting as a casual get-together, insisting they only discussed their frustrations with their current lives. However, the detectives were skeptical, especially given her strong loyalty to Rebecca and the presence of her fingerprint on the murder weapon. Karen's involvement with Xenon Philosophy also raised red flags. The group, often viewed as a cult, had a reputation for promoting extreme loyalty among its members. Detective Brown asked Karen if the group had influenced her actions, but Karen vehemently denied it, saying Xenon Philosophy was about finding inner peace, not violence. As the questioning continued, Karen became more agitated. Her defensive behavior only increased the detective's suspicions. Officer Davis, known for his sharp observational skills, noticed Karen's hands trembling slightly, a sign of her growing anxiety. The police also searched Karen's home, looking for any additional evidence. They found several items linking her to Rebecca and Jimmy, including text messages and meeting notes related to Xenon Philosophy. While these items did not directly implicate Karen in the murder, they showed the close connection between the three suspects. Despite Karen's denials, the evidence against her was compelling. The fingerprint on the knife, her inconsistent alibi, and her aggressive loyalty to Rebecca all pointed to her potential involvement in Adam's death. The detectives believed Karen knew more than she was willing to admit and continued to apply pressure, hoping she would crack under the weight of the evidence. The investigation into Karen Blanchard was a crucial step in solving the case. The police were closer than ever to uncovering the full story behind Adam Johnson's tragic death, but they needed to keep pushing to find the final piece of the puzzle. On August 25, 2013, after a thorough investigation, the police finally identified the murderer, Rebecca Johnson. The breakthrough came when detectives uncovered a series of deleted text messages on Rebecca's phone. These messages, recovered by forensic experts, revealed her desperation and fear of losing her children. Adam had discovered her affairs with Jimmy and Karen and planned to leave her, taking custody of their children, Modelo and Reno, because he did not want them to be raised in Xenon Philosophy. On the night of August 14, Rebecca had confronted Adam about his plans to leave. A heated argument ensued, escalating into a violent struggle. In a fit of rage and desperation, Rebecca blindfolded Adam, tied him to a chair, and stabbed him multiple times, delivering a fatal wound to his heart. She then attempted to stage the scene to look like a home invasion gone wrong. Detective Clarissa Brown and Officer Dean Davis pieced together the timeline of events from the recovered messages and other evidence. They presented their findings to the district attorney, who issued a warrant for Rebecca's arrest. On the morning of August 26, the police arrived at Rebecca's home. It was a tense moment as they knocked on the door. Rebecca answered, appearing calm but visibly nervous. The officers informed Rebecca of the charges against her and placed her under arrest. She was shocked and initially denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. As she was led away in handcuffs, her neighbors watched in disbelief. The once vibrant and outgoing woman was now at the center of a horrific crime. Rebecca's arrest brought a mix of emotions to the community. Adam's family, devastated by his loss, felt a sense of relief knowing the murderer had been caught. However, the revelation that Rebecca was responsible for his death added another layer of pain. Rebecca's children, Modelo and Reno, were taken into the care of Adam's parents. The community rallied around the family, offering support during this difficult time. The local news stations covered the arrest, highlighting the tragic turn of events. The investigation had been long and complex, but the dedication of Detective Brown, Officer Davis, and their colleagues ensured that justice was served. The evidence, combined with Rebecca's actions, and the recovered messages painted a clear picture of her guilt. Rebecca's arrest marked the end of a dark chapter in Alpharetta. The community hoped for healing and justice for Adam Johnson and his family. Rebecca Johnson's trial for the murder of her husband Adam began on November 15, 2013, in the Fulton County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like WSB-TV and concerned residents of Alpharetta. The trial drew significant attention due to the shocking details of the case. The prosecution, led by District Attorney James Morgan, age 45, presented a compelling argument. Known for his thorough and determined approach, Morgan meticulously laid out the evidence against Rebecca. He detailed the affair with Jimmy Lewis Carter, her involvement with Karen Blanchard, and the influence of Zen on philosophy. He highlighted the recovered text messages, the forensic evidence, and the violent nature of Adam's murder. The defense, led by attorney Laura Simmons, age 38, attempted to paint a different picture. Simmons, known for her empathetic yet assertive style, argued that Rebecca was a victim of emotional abuse and manipulation. She claimed that Rebecca acted in self-defense and that her involvement with Zen and philosophy had clouded her judgment. Simmons tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline and the reliability of the recovered messages. Throughout the trial, Adam's family sat in the courtroom, visibly distressed by the proceedings. Jane and Robert Johnson, Adam's parents, watched every detail unfold with a mix of sorrow and anger. Their presence reminded everyone of the human cost of the crime. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On December 2, 2013, they found Rebecca Johnson guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Rebecca showed little emotion, staring blankly ahead. During sentencing, the judge addressed the court. She emphasized the gravity of the crime and the impact on Adam's family and the community. This was a senseless act driven by fear and desperation, she said. Rebecca was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rebecca's conviction and sentencing were seen as a fair resolution by most, though some felt sympathy for her, considering the emotional turmoil she had been experiencing. The trial's outcome provided a measure of justice for Adam Johnson and his family, allowing them to begin the long process of healing. After Rebecca Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without parole, the lives of those involved in the case changed drastically. Adam Johnson's family, still grappling with their loss, tried to find a new sense of normalcy. Jane and Robert Johnson, Adam's parents, took in their grandchildren, Modelo and Reno. The children, now under their grandparents' care, slowly adjusted to their new life. The Johnsons received overwhelming support from the Alpharetta community. Local groups and neighbors organized fundraisers and events to help the family. Rebecca's incarceration left a void in the lives of her children. Despite the severity of her crime, they were allowed occasional supervised visits to the prison, arranged by Child Welfare Services. These visits were emotionally challenging, as the children struggled to understand why their mother was behind bars. Jane and Robert Johnson did their best to provide a stable, loving environment for Modelo and Reno, shielding them from the media frenzy surrounding the case. Jimmy Lewis Carter, Rebecca's lover and a central figure in the investigation, faced his own set of challenges. The media attention affected his football career at Georgia Tech. Although he was not charged with any crime, his involvement with Rebecca and Zen on philosophy raised questions about his character. Jimmy decided to leave Georgia Tech and transferred to a smaller university to escape the scrutiny and rebuild his life. Karen Blanchard, Rebecca's best friend, also faced public backlash. Her aggressive defense of Rebecca and her involvement in the Zen on philosophy group made her a controversial figure. After the trial, Karen distanced herself from the group and sought therapy to deal with the emotional fallout. She moved to a different state, hoping for a fresh start away from the memories of the case. Life after the trial was a period of adjustment and healing for everyone involved. While the pain of Adam Johnson's death could never be erased, his family and the community worked together to honor his memory and move forward. The story of Adam Johnson and the tragic events of August 2013 left an indelible stain on Alpharetta, reminding all of the importance of justice and community support in the face of tragedy. Today, we explore the life and tragic death of a stay-at-home mom who found herself at the center of a tangled web of secrets, desires, and betrayal, a web that ultimately led to her untimely demise. Tina Boland was a 42-year-old stay-at-home mom who lived in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. She was well known in her community as a friendly and sociable woman who was always willing to lend a helping hand. Tina was the kind of neighbor who remembered birthdays, organized block parties, and never missed a chance to volunteer at her children's school events. She lived with her husband, Michael Boland, a 46-year-old insurance agent, and their 2 teenage children aged 16 and 15. In April 2014, Tina was at the peak of her involvement in the neighborhood. Tina was often seen driving her kids to practice in her blue Honda Odyssey, stopping by the local Starbucks for a caramel macchiato on the way. She was also active in her church, where she helped coordinate charity drives and bake sales. But Tina's life had another side, one that few knew about. Beneath her outward appearance as a devoted wife and mother, Tina was involved in a series of secret sexual relationships with other women in her community. These relationships were kept hidden from her family and most of her other friends. Tina was the belle of the ball in this secret circle, engaging in passionate sexual affairs with approximately a half-dozen other stay-at-home moms in her neighborhood. She enjoyed the thrill of these relationships, which gave her a sense of excitement and freedom that she didn't find in her bland suburban life. In the days leading up to her death, Tina was particularly excited about her new relationship with Hope Johnson, a 45-year-old woman who had recently moved into the neighborhood. Tina's friends noticed that she seemed happier than usual, but they had no idea of the secret life she was living. This hidden world, filled with desire and jealousy, would soon lead to a tragedy that would shock the entire community. On the morning of April 15, 2014, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Tina Boland's lifeless body was discovered at the bottom of the stairs in her home in Rio Rancho of New Mexico. It was a typical spring morning, with the sun shining brightly and the sound of birds chirping in the trees outside. The discovery was made by Lisa DeAngelis, Tina's close friend and neighbor, who had come over after not receiving any responses to her text and calls the night before. Lisa and Tina had a strong bond, often meeting up at the local Panera Bread for coffee and catching up on the latest gossip. That morning, when Lisa arrived at Tina's house, she noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. Concerned, she called out Tina's name as she stepped inside, but there was no response. As she walked further into the house, her heart began to race. The house was eerily quiet, with the faint sound of the TV playing in the background. When Lisa reached the staircase, she was met with a sight that would haunt her forever. Tina was lying at the bottom of the stairs, her body twisted in an unnatural position. She was wearing a light blue nightgown, and her hair was matted with blood from a cut on her lip. Lisa froze in shock, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. After a few moments, Lisa snapped out of her daze and frantically dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the operator, trying to explain what she had found. The 911 operator remained calm, asking Lisa to stay on the line until help arrived. Lisa could hardly keep her composure as she paced back and forth, her eyes never leaving Tina's motionless body. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air as emergency responders arrived at the scene. Lisa was visibly shaken as paramedics rushed into the house. She stepped aside to let them work, her hands trembling as she watched them assess Tina's condition. Despite their efforts, it was clear that Tina was already gone. The paramedics confirmed that Tina was dead, and Lisa collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. The tragedy of Tina Boland's death had just begun to unfold, leaving a community in shock and searching for answers. The Rio Rancho Police Department arrived quickly at Tina Boland's home on April 15, 2014, around 8:45 a.m., just minutes after Lisa DeAngelis called 911. The first officers on the scene were Detective Martina Lopez, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp instincts, and Officer James Carson, a young patrolman with 2 years on the force. As they entered the house, they were met with the unsettling sight of Tina's body at the bottom of the stairs. Detective Lopez immediately took charge, instructing Officer Carson to secure the scene and make sure no one else entered the home. The staircase where Tina was found was carpeted with beige walls that showed no signs of a struggle. Tina's body was lying in a twisted position, her head turned awkwardly to the side. A small pool of blood had formed under her head, but the scene was relatively clean, with no obvious signs of a violent altercation. The detective carefully examined the area around Tina's body. The staircase was steep, with wooden railings that seemed solid and well-maintained. Lopez noted that Tina was barefoot, and there was a noticeable absence of anything that could have caused her to trip. The nightgown Tina was wearing was slightly torn at the hem, but there were no visible signs of a fight. As she continued her inspection, Lopez's eyes were drawn to a few details that seemed out of place. Tina's phone was found halfway down the stairs, its screen cracked, as if it had been dropped during a fall. But there was something odd about the position of Tina's body. It didn't match the typical pattern seen in accidental falls. The angle at which she had landed raised immediate red flags for the detective. The paramedics who had already confirmed Tina's death stepped back as the police continued their investigation. Detective Lopez ordered a full forensic sweep of the house. She wanted to ensure that every possible piece of evidence was collected. Bettine used luminol to check for any hidden traces of blood, and fingerprint powder was dusted on the stair railings and nearby surfaces. As Lopez observed the scene, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. Her instincts told her that Tina's death might not be the tragic accident it first appeared to be. The lack of defensive wounds, the strange position of the body, and the eerie stillness of the house all pointed to something more sinister. With this in mind, the investigation would move forward with a closer look at those closest to Tina, beginning with her husband and her friends. Lisa De Angelis, 39, was the first person police turned to in their investigation. Known in the neighborhood as a nurturing and caring individual, Lisa had a reputation for being a devoted friend, especially to Tina Boland. They were often seen together at local spots like Panera Bread, and their children played together frequently. But as the police began to dig deeper, they uncovered a relationship between Lisa and Tina that went far beyond friendship. During her initial interrogation, Lisa appeared shaken but cooperative. Detective Martina Lopez, who was leading the investigation, noted Lisa's nervousness. She fidgeted constantly, her hands trembling as she answered questions. At first, Lisa described her friendship with Tina in typical terms, talking about their shared activities and the closeness they had developed over the years. However, as the questioning continued, it became clear that there was much more to their relationship. Under pressure, Lisa admitted that she and Tina had been involved in a secret sexual relationship for several months. The revelation stunned the detectives. Lisa described the relationship as passionate but complicated. Tina had confided in her, revealing that she was unhappy in her marriage and found comfort and excitement in their affair, and that Lisa made her feel like, quote, a Disney princess. But recently, things had taken a turn for the worse. Lisa explained that Tina had started to pull away from her, becoming increasingly distant. Tina had met a new neighbor, Hope Johnson, and had quickly developed a sexual relationship with her. Lisa confessed that she felt jealous and hurt, and she and Tina had argued about it several times, especially after Lisa had caught Hope and Tina having sex in her daughter's bed. Just a few days before Tina's death, Lisa had confronted her, telling Tina that she couldn't continue their relationship as she was seeing someone else. The police were intrigued by Lisa's admission. Jealousy was a powerful motive, and Lisa's emotional state raised suspicions. But when asked directly if she had anything to do with Tina's death, Lisa firmly denied it. She claimed that their argument was heated, but not violent. According to Lisa, she left Tina's house that evening upset, but never imagined it would be the last time she saw her friend alive. Lisa's interrogation left detectives with more questions than answers. Her jealousy was evident, and her connection to Tina placed her squarely under the microscope. But without concrete evidence, they couldn't make an arrest. The investigation would have to continue, with detectives looking closely at the other people in Tina's life who might have had a reason to harm her. Hope Johnson, 45, was the second person the police turned to in their investigation. Hope had recently moved to Rio Rancho from Atlanta, Georgia, just 6 months prior to Tina Boland's death. On the surface, Hope appeared to be a polished and professional woman. She was a real estate agent known for her sharp business acumen and poised demeanor. Her arrival in the neighborhood had caused a bit of a stir, with many of the local moms curious about the new resident. Hope's relationship with Tina had developed quickly. Neighbors noticed that the two women were often together, sharing private moments at local spots like the Starbucks on Southern Boulevard. They frequently texted each other, and there were whispers that their relationship might be more than just friendship. When Detective Martina Lopez questioned Hope, she maintained a calm and composed exterior, but there was an underlying tension that the detective couldn't ignore. Hope initially downplayed her relationship with Tina, describing it as a friendly connection formed through shared interests and neighborhood activities. However, when pressed, Hope admitted that their relationship had become intimate. Hope described Tina as someone who was charming and fun to be around, but also very persistent. She claimed that Tina had made the first move, DM her naked pictures, and suggesting they take their friendship to, quote, a place beyond your wildest dreams. At first, Hope was hesitant, knowing that Tina was married, but eventually, she gave in to the excitement of their secret affair. Despite the close bond they shared, Hope insisted that she had no reason to harm Tina. She revealed that Tina had recently begun expressing more serious feelings for her, even hinting at leaving her husband, Michael, to be with her. But this level of commitment made Hope uncomfortable. She had only just settled into the neighborhood and was dealing with her own marital issues. The last thing she wanted was to be entangled in a scandal. Hope's calm demeanor began to crack when detectives asked about the night of Tina's death. Hope claimed she was at home with her husband, but there was something in her voice that made the detectives doubt her story. Text messages retrieved from Tina's phone showed that Hope and Tina had been in contact late into the evening, and some of the messages suggested tension between them. There were even videos of the two having sex, which Hope had shared with other soccer moms in a way that flaunted their relationship. Though Hope denied any involvement in Tina's death, her connection to the victim and the underlying jealousy she harbored made her a key suspect in the investigation. The police would need more evidence to either confirm or clear her of suspicion. Michael Boland, 46, was the third person the police focused on in their investigation. As Tina Boland's husband, Michael was naturally a person of interest. Michael worked as an insurance agent, a job that kept him busy and often on the road. Neighbors described him as a quiet and somewhat distant figure, rarely seen at community events or social gatherings. He seemed to prefer spending his time away from home. And it was common knowledge that his relationship with Tina had been strained for years. When Detective Martina Lopez and her team interviewed Michael, he appeared stoic and detached, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil surrounding Tina's death. He admitted that his marriage to Tina had been rocky for some time. They had grown apart, with Michael spending more and more time on business trips or simply avoiding being at home. "I needed to get away from that awful woman," Michael said during the interview, his words carrying a bitterness that raised red flags for the detectives. Michael claimed he had no idea about Tina's secret sexual relationships with other women. He insisted that he was completely unaware of her affair with Lisa DeAngelis and was shocked to learn about her involvement with Hope Johnson. However, the detectives couldn't help but wonder if Michael's ignorance was genuine or if he was hiding something. The night of Tina's death, Michael told the police he had been out of town on a business trip in Los Angeles. He provided the names of colleagues who could verify his whereabouts, and at first glance, his alibi seemed solid. But there was something about Michael's demeanor that didn't sit right with the detectives. He was too calm, too measured, and his lack of visible grief made them suspicious. The investigation into Michael's possible motive revealed that he had a lot to lose if his marriage to Tina ended in divorce. Tina had inherited a significant amount of money from her parents, and if they divorced, Michael would likely lose access to that wealth. Moreover, there were rumors that Michael had been seeing other women and even some men during his frequent business trips, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Despite a strong alibi, Michael remained on the police's radar. His distant relationship with Tina, his financial concerns, and his possible infidelity all pointed to a potential motive. The detectives knew they needed to dig deeper into Michael's life and alibi before they could rule him out as a suspect. On April 18, 2014, 3 days after Tina Boland's death, a significant breakthrough came in the form of new evidence. It was a cool, overcast morning in Rio Rancho, and Detective Martina Lopez was reviewing the case files when she received a call from the forensic team. They had discovered something unusual in Tina's home, a small but telling detail that had initially been overlooked. The new evidence was a scuff mark on the wall near the bottom of the stairs where Tina had been found. The mark was faint, but it suggested that something, or someone, had made contact with the wall during the fall. Forensic experts used advanced techniques, including 3D imaging, to analyze the mark. They concluded that it was consistent with the sole of a shoe, indicating that Tina might have been pushed or tripped rather than having fallen accidentally. This discovery was a turning point in the investigation. The scuff mark suggested foul play, and Detective Lopez knew they had to revisit the crime scene with fresh eyes. The forensic team also found traces of skin cells under Tina's fingernails, which were sent to the lab for DNA analysis. This led the police to consider that Tina might have fought back against her attacker. With this new evidence, the detectives intensified their focus on the three main suspects: Lisa DeAngelis, Hope Johnson, and Michael Boland. They brought each of them back in for further questioning, this time armed with the knowledge that Tina's death was likely no accident. The discovery of the scuff mark and the DNA evidence under Tina's nails suggested that she had struggled with someone before her fatal fall. The police also re-examined the text messages on Tina's phone. paying closer attention to the exchanges she had with Lisa and Hope in the hours leading up to her death. The messages hinted at tension and jealousy, particularly between Tina and Lisa. These messages, combined with the new physical evidence, pointed to a possible confrontation. As the investigation progressed, Detective Lopez felt they were closing in on the truth. The new evidence gave the team a clearer picture of what might have happened that night. Tina's death was beginning to look less like a tragic accident and more like the result of a heated altercation. The police were determined to find out who was responsible, knowing that the scuff mark on the wall and the DNA under Tina's nails could be the key to solving the case. On April 20, 2014, the investigation into Tina Boland's death took a decisive turn. The DNA analysis from the skin cells found under Tina's fingernails came back with a match: Lisa DeAngelis. This discovery, combined with the scuff mark on the wall near the stairs, led Detective Martina Lopez to believe that Tina's death was not an accident, but a homicide. Lisa DeAngelis, 39, was a stay-at-home mom known for her nurturing personality. However, beneath her calm exterior, she harbored deep insecurities and fears of losing the people she loved. Tina Boland was at the center of these fears. While their sexual relationship had been the most passionate one of their lives, it was also fraught with jealousy and tension. When Tina started having sex with her new neighbor, Hope Johnson, Lisa felt threatened and betrayed. On the night of April 15, 2014, Tina and Lisa had a heated argument at Tina's home after Lisa caught Hope and Tina having sex. The argument escalated quickly, with emotions running high. Lisa, in a fit of jealousy and desperation, pushed Tina during the argument. The push caused Tina to lose her balance and fall down the stairs, hitting her head on the way down. The scuff mark on the wall was from Tina's shoe as she tried to regain her balance. The detectives pieced together that Tina had fought back, scratching Lisa in the process, which explained the skin cells under Tina's nails. After realizing what had happened, Lisa panicked. She left the scene, hoping the fall would be ruled an accident, but the physical evidence told a different story. On the morning of April 21, 2014, the police moved to arrest Lisa DeAngelis. Detective Lopez, along with a team of officers, arrived at Lisa's home. Lisa was visibly shaken when the police informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Tina Boland. She didn't resist but appeared in shock, as if the reality of her actions had only just hit her. As she was led away in handcuffs, Lisa muttered that she never meant to hurt Tina. She just wanted her back. The arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Tina's family, especially her husband Michael, was devastated by the news. They had lost a wife and mother, and now they had to come to terms with the fact that her death was the result of a senseless act of jealousy. Michael, who had been cleared of any wrongdoing, expressed his disbelief that someone so close to Tina could do something so terrible. The trial of Lisa DeAngelis for the murder of Tina Boland began in late October 2014 at the Sandoval County Courthouse. The case had garnered significant media attention, with local news outlets like KRQE and the Albuquerque Journal covering every development. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including many of Tina's friends and family members who were eager to see justice served. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney James Wallace, a 45-year-old seasoned prosecutor known for his tenacity in the courtroom. Wallace argued that Lisa DeAngelis had acted out of intense jealousy, leading her to push Tina down the stairs during a heated argument. He presented the physical evidence, including the scuff mark on the wall and the DNA analysis of the skin cells found under Tina's fingernails. Wallace emphasized that Tina's death was not an accident, but the result of a deliberate act of violence. On the other side, the defense was handled by public defender Karen Michalowski, a 38-year-old attorney known for a compassionate approach to her clients. Michalowski argued that Lisa's actions were not premeditated and that the push was a result of an emotional outburst rather than an intent to kill. She portrayed Lisa as a woman who was deeply in love with Tina and had simply lost control in a moment of overwhelming emotion. Michalowski pleaded with the jury to consider Lisa's remorse and the fact that she had no prior history of violence. Throughout the trial, Tina's family watched with a mix of grief and anger. Michael Boland, Tina's husband, struggled to hold back tears as he listened to the details of his wife's final moments. The impact of Tina's death on her family was clear, and their presence in the courtroom served as a reminder of the real human cost of the crime. After several days of testimony and evidence presentation, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. On November 3, 2014, Lisa DeAngelis was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. a sentence that many in the courtroom felt was too lenient given the circumstances. The verdict brought some closure to Tina's family, but the pain of losing her would never fully heal. For Lisa, the sentence marked the beginning of a long journey of reflection and regret. The trial and its outcome left a lasting impact on the Rio Rancho community, a stark reminder of how quickly love can turn to tragedy. After the trial, life in Rio Rancho slowly returned to normal, but the community was forever changed by the events surrounding Tina Boland's death. For Tina's family, the aftermath was a mix of sorrow and adjustment. Michael Boland, now a single parent, focused on rebuilding his life and caring for his children. He continued working as an insurance agent, but his once quiet demeanor became even more reserved. Michael found solace in his work and spending time with his children, who were struggling to cope with the loss of their mother. Lisa DeAngelis, after being convicted of second-degree murder, began serving her 20-year sentence at the New Mexico Women's Correctional Facility. Her life in prison was marked by isolation and reflection. The once active community member now faced a daily routine behind bars. Lisa's trial and conviction were covered extensively by local news outlets like KORQB, and her case became a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked jealousy and emotional turmoil. For Hope Johnson, the new neighbor who had been a suspect in the case, life went on with a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. She moved away from Rio Rancho shortly after the trial concluded, seeking a fresh start in a new city. Her reputation in the neighborhood had been tarnished, despite being cleared of any wrongdoing, and she felt it was best to leave behind the memories of the past year. The impact of Tina Boland's death and Lisa DeAngelis' trial extended beyond the immediate circle of those involved. It served as a sobering reminder of how personal relationships and emotional conflicts can escalate into devastating outcomes. The case highlighted the importance of addressing and managing emotional issues before they spiral out of control, leaving a lasting mark on the community and those who lived through it. Carolyn Hershey was a 29-year-old woman with a passion for life and creativity. She was known for her bright smile and warm personality, always ready to make new friends and share her love of photography. Born and raised in San Mateo, California, Carolyn went to the Academy of Art University where she honed her skills in photography. She had a knack for capturing beautiful moments and often posted her work on Instagram, where she had a growing following. Carolyn had a close-knit family. Her younger sister, Jessica, was her best friend, and they shared many adventures together. Their parents, John and Lisa, were supportive and loving, always encouraging their daughters to follow their dreams. Carolyn often talked about her dream of starting a family and building a life filled with love and creativity. In June 2011, Carolyn had just married Gaskell Hershey Jr., a charming and successful man from Macon, Georgia. They chose the Marriott Maui Resort in Hawaii for their honeymoon, a place Carolyn had always wanted to visit. She was excited about the trip and shared her plans on Facebook, posting pictures of the resort and the beautiful Hawaiian scenery. Before her disappearance, Carolyn spent her days exploring the island, taking photographs of the beaches, sunsets, and tropical plants. She visited popular tourist spots like Haleakala National Park and the Road to Hana, documenting everything with her camera. She was also excited to try local foods, including poke bowls and shaved ice, and often talked about the delicious meals she had. Carolyn's friends described her as a vibrant and positive person. She had a talent for making people feel special and loved. Her Instagram stories were filled with messages of gratitude and joy, reflecting her optimistic outlook on life. She enjoyed reading, often sharing her thoughts on popular books of the time. She also loved listening to music and was a big fan of artists like Adele and Bruno Mars. As Carolyn embarked on her honeymoon, she was full of hope and excitement for the future. She looked forward to building a life with Gaskell, dreaming of a happy marriage and eventually starting the family. However, her dreams were tragically cut short, leaving her family and friends in deep sorrow and confusion. Carolyn's story is a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Her vibrant spirit and passion for life left a lasting impact on everyone who knew her. On June 12, 2011, Carolyn Hershey was last seen at the Marriott Maui Resort in Hawaii. The next morning, Linda Chang, a hotel staff member, noticed that Carolyn had missed several scheduled activities. Linda, who had worked at the resort for over 5 years, found this unusual. Carolyn had been enthusiastic about the snorkeling trip and the lure dinner she had signed up for, sharing her excitement with Linda just the day before. Concerned, Linda knocked on the door of Carolyn's room. There was no answer. She waited for a moment, then knocked again, louder this time. Still, there was no response. Linda decided to use her master key to enter the room, following hotel protocol for guest safety. Inside, the room was tidy, with no signs of a struggle. Carolyn's suitcase was still there, along with her camera and some clothes. However, Carolyn and her personal items, like her phone and purse, were missing. Feeling uneasy, Linda reported Carolyn's absence to the hotel management. The manager on duty immediately took action. He called the local police and informed them about the missing guest. By this time, it was late morning, and the sun was high in the sky, casting a bright light over the resort. The police arrived quickly, led by Officer Evelyn Cutie Pie Martinez, a seasoned detective known for her thoroughness and attention to detail. She asked Linda to describe what she had found and then started a search of the area. The police questioned hotel staff and guests, hoping to find someone who had seen Carolyn. One guest, Jason Millstone, staying in the room next to Carolyn's, recalled hearing a loud argument from their room the previous night. He mentioned it to the police, adding that he had seen Gaskell, Carolyn's husband, acting strangely afterward. Meanwhile, Carolyn's husband, Gaskell Hershey, appeared distraught. He told the police he had woken up to find his wife missing and had been searching for her since early morning. His behavior seemed anxious, and he repeatedly insisted that Carolyn must have gone for an early morning swim and gotten lost. Despite an extensive search of the resort grounds and nearby beaches, Carolyn was nowhere to be found. The police broadened their search to the surrounding area, interviewing more witnesses and looking for any clues that might explain her sudden disappearance. As the hours turned into days, the mystery deepened. News of Carolyn's disappearance spread quickly, with local media covering the story. Friends and family from California flew in, desperate for answers. The Marriott Maui Resort, usually a place of joy and relaxation, became the center of a tense and heartbreaking investigation. The police arrived at the Marriott Maui Resort quickly on the morning of June 13, 2011. Leading the team was Detective Mark Kim Linzis, a calm and meticulous investigator known for solving difficult cases. Officer Evelyn Cutie Pie Martinez, who was already on the scene, briefed him on what they had learned so far. They knew Carolyn Hershey had been missing for about 24 hours, and time was critical. The room Carolyn shared with her husband Gaskell was their first stop. It looked tidy and undisturbed. The bed was neatly made, their luggage was in place, and nothing seemed out of order. But Detective Kim Linzis noticed Carolyn's camera on the nightstand and her suitcase, partially unpacked. He also noted that some of her personal items, like her phone and purse, were missing, which was strange for someone who had supposedly just gone for a swim. The police used various tools to examine the room. They dusted for fingerprints, looking for any signs of a struggle or someone else's presence. They used luminol to check for traces of blood, but the tests came back clean. Kim Linzis interviewed Gaskell, who claimed he woke up to find his wife gone. His story seemed rehearsed, and his anxiety was apparent, but there was no direct evidence linking him to her disappearance. Outside the room, police expanded their search to the resort grounds. They interviewed hotel staff and guests. Linda Chang, a hotel employee who first noticed Carolyn's absence, provided a detailed account of what she found when she entered the room. Jason Millstone, the guest next door, reported hearing a loud argument from Carolyn in Gaskell's room the night before. Kim Linzis and his team also checked the resort's security footage. They saw Carolyn and Gaskell returning to their room around 10 p.m. on June 12th. They were holding hands, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, later footage showed Gaskell leaving the room alone around 3 a.m., looking nervous and hurried. He returned about an hour later, his clothes slightly disheveled. The police continued their search along the nearby beaches, fearing that Carolyn's body might have been washed ashore. They used boats and divers to explore the ocean near the resort but found nothing. The lack of physical evidence made the case even more challenging. Despite the clean crime scene, Detective Kim Linzis felt that something was off. He knew they needed to dig deeper into the lives of Carolyn and Gaskell. As the investigation continued, the police focused on finding any small detail that could lead them to the truth about what happened to Carolyn Hershey. Gaskell Hershey Jr., 33, became the primary suspect in his wife Carolyn's disappearance. Gaskell, a successful businessman from Macon, Georgia, had charmed many with his good looks and wealth. He and Carolyn had seemed like the perfect couple, especially on social media, where they posted pictures of their wedding and honeymoon. But as the police dug deeper, a different picture of Gaskell began to emerge. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angelin Cutie Pie Martinez started their interrogation of Gaskell at the Marriott Maui Resort. Initially, Gaskell appeared calm and cooperative, insisting he had no idea what had happened to his wife. He claimed they had gone to bed around 10 p.m. after a romantic evening. When he woke up around 6 a.m., Carolyn was gone. He assumed she had gone for an early morning swim, something she loved to do. As the questioning continued, Gaskell's composure began to crack. Detective Kim Linzis asked about their relationship, and Gaskell's answers became defensive. He admitted they had arguments, which he described as normal marital disagreements. However, friends and family told a different story. They said Gaskell was controlling and possessive, often isolating Carolyn from her friends and family. Further investigation revealed troubling details. Carolyn's sister, Jessica, shared messages where Carolyn expressed fear and uncertainty about her marriage. She described Gaskell's behavior as increasingly erratic. These messages painted a picture of a relationship in turmoil, contrasting sharply with the happy images they projected online. The police also learned about Gaskell's financial troubles. Despite his appearance of wealth, he had significant debts. His business was struggling, and he had taken out several large loans. This raised the possibility that Gaskell had a motive to harm Carolyn, perhaps to gain access to her life insurance or to cover up his financial problems. Detective Kim Linzis asked Gaskell about the security footage showing him leaving the room at 3 a.m. Gaskell stammered, claiming he went for a walk because he couldn't sleep. His story seemed inconsistent, and his nervous demeanor raised more red flags. Despite his increasingly evasive answers, Gaskell stuck to his story. He maintained that he loved Carolyn and would never harm her. But the more he talked, the more suspicious he seemed. The police decided to keep him under close watch, knowing they needed more evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation into Gaskell continued, the police explored other leads, hoping to uncover the truth about what happened to Carolyn Hershey. Jason Nilstone, 31, was the second suspect in the case of Carolyn Hershey's disappearance. Jason, a Canadian YouTuber, was staying at the Marriott Maui Resort in the room next to Carolyn and Gaskell. Jason's YouTube channel, filled with travel adventures and extreme sports, had made him somewhat famous. He was outgoing, friendly, and always looking for his next big story. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angelin Cutie Pie Martinez brought Jason in for questioning. Jason was cooperative and seemed genuinely concerned about Carolyn. He told the detectives about several disturbing encounters he had with Gaskell during his stay at the resort. Jason recounted how Gaskell had approached him several times and asked him for sex, making him feel uncomfortable. On one occasion, Gaskell had dropped his bathrobe and lunged at Jason, an incident that Jason had reported to the hotel staff. The detectives asked Jason about the night Carolyn disappeared. He mentioned hearing loud arguing from their room around midnight. He said it sounded intense, with raised voices and slamming doors. Jason couldn't make out the exact words, but noted that it lasted for about an hour. He didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was just a typical argument. Jason also told the detectives that Gaskell seemed nervous and agitated the following morning. He saw Gaskell pacing back and forth outside the room, checking his phone frequently. When Jason asked if everything was okay, Gaskell gave a vague response and quickly walked away. The police found Jason's account credible. He seemed genuinely concerned for Carolyn and had no apparent motive to harm her. Jason was known for his adventurous spirit, not for any violent behavior. However, they had to consider all possibilities and asked him about his whereabouts during the critical hours. Jason explained that he had been editing videos in his room and had not left until morning. To verify his alibi, the police checked the hotel's Wi-Fi logs, confirming that Jason had been online during the time in question. They also reviewed security footage which showed Jason entering his room around 10 p.m. and not leaving until 7 a.m. the next day. Despite Jason's disturbing encounters with Gaskell, there was no direct evidence linking him to Carolyn's disappearance. The police continued to investigate other leads, but Jason remained a person of interest due to his proximity and the information he provided. As the investigation progressed, the police were determined to find out the truth and bring justice for Carolyn Hershey. On June 15, 2011, 3 days after Carolyn Hershey disappeared, new evidence came to light. It was a sunny morning with clear skies, typical for Hawaii. A beachgoer found something unusual while walking along the shore near the Marriott Maui Resort. She noticed a piece of cloth tangled in the rocks. Upon closer inspection, she realized it was part of a woman's dress. She called the police right away. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angelin Cutie Pie Martinez arrived promptly and carefully examined the fabric. It was a torn piece of a floral dress, matching the one Carolyn was last seen wearing. The discovery reignited hope for finding more clues about her disappearance. The police expanded their search area, focusing on the rocky shoreline and nearby waters. They brought in a team of divers to explore the ocean floor, looking for any additional evidence. The search was painstaking and thorough, with divers scanning every inch of the seabed. They used underwater cameras and metal detectors, hoping to find something that could provide answers. Meanwhile, on the shore, forensic experts analyzed the torn dress piece. They carefully bagged and labeled it, noting its exact location. They checked for any bloodstains, fibers, or other traces that could offer more information. The cloth was sent to the lab for further analysis, including tests for DNA and any potential chemical residues. Detective Kim Linzis also revisited the hotel's security footage, focusing on the area around the beach. He noticed a shadowy figure moving near the water around 4 a.m. on the night Carolyn vanished. Although the footage was grainy, it provided a new lead. The police interviewed hotel guests and staff again, asking if anyone had seen anything suspicious at that time. The investigation took another turn when Officer Martinez received a tip from the local fisherman, who reported seeing a man near the water early that morning. The description matched Gaskell Hershey. The fisherman said the man appeared to be struggling with something heavy, which he then pushed into the water. With this new information, the police brought Gaskell in for further questioning. His earlier calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by visible anxiety. When confronted with the new evidence, Gaskell became defensive and evasive, denying any involvement and claiming he was being framed. His responses raised even more suspicion. As the lab results came in, they confirmed that the torn dress belonged to Carolyn. The presence of seawater and sand indicated she might have been in the water. This crucial piece of evidence pushed the investigation forward, bringing the police closer to uncovering the truth. Detective Kim Linzis and his team knew they were getting closer. The new evidence provided a clearer picture of what might have happened, and they were determined to solve the mystery of Carolyn Hershey's disappearance. Oliver Kamehameha, 27, was the third suspect in the case of Carolyn Hershey's disappearance. Oliver was a busboy at the Marriott Maui Resort, known for his quiet and introverted nature. He had worked at the resort for 2 years and was often described as a hardworking but reserved individual. However, Oliver had a past involving minor drug offenses, specifically marijuana, which made the police take a closer look at him. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angelin Cutie Pie Martinez called Oliver in for questioning. Oliver seemed nervous but cooperative. He admitted that he had been having a sexual relationship with Gaskell Hershey, Carolyn's husband. This relationship started just 30 minutes after Gaskell and Carolyn arrived at the resort. Oliver said Gaskell pulled him into a bathroom to have sex while Carolyn was checking in. Oliver explained that he was involved with Gaskell purely for financial reasons. Oliver revealed a critical piece of information. Carolyn had walked in on him and Gaskell just hours before she disappeared. He described the encounter as shocking and tense. Carolyn was visibly upset and stormed out of the room. Oliver said that Gaskell appeared angry and worried after she left. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. The police asked Oliver about his whereabouts on the night of Carolyn's disappearance. Oliver stated that he had been working late and then went to his apartment, which was nearby. He claimed he had no involvement in Carolyn's disappearance and was only concerned about keeping his job. To verify Oliver's alibi, the police checked the resort's employee logs and interviewed his coworkers. They confirmed that Oliver had finished his shift around midnight. Security footage showed him leaving the resort and heading to his apartment. There was no evidence to suggest he had returned to the resort during the critical hours when Carolyn went missing. Despite Oliver's troubling relationship with Gaskell, the police found no direct evidence linking him to Carolyn's disappearance. His story about the encounter with Carolyn provided a possible motive for Gaskell but did not implicate Oliver directly. His nervous demeanor during questioning was noted, but it could have been due to fear of losing his job and not necessarily guilt. As the investigation continued, the police kept Oliver under surveillance but focused more on Gaskell, whose behavior and inconsistencies were becoming more suspicious. The new information about the encounter between Carolyn, Gaskell, and Oliver added crucial context to the case, helping the police piece together the events leading up to Carolyn's disappearance. Detective Kim Linzis and his team were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Carolyn Hershey. On June 20, 2011, the police identified Gaskell Hershey as the murderer of his wife, Carolyn. Gaskell, 33, was a successful businessman from Macon, Georgia. He had a charming personality and came from a wealthy family. However, beneath his polished exterior, Gaskell had a controlling and possessive streak. Friends and family had noticed his erratic behavior leading up to the honeymoon. The motive for the murder became clear as the police pieced together the evidence. Carolyn had discovered Gaskell's secret affair with Oliver Kamehameha, a busboy of the resort. Gaskell, desperate to hide his secret, killed Carolyn to prevent her from exposing him. The couple had argued the night she disappeared, and Gaskell's anger and fear led him to commit the crime. On the morning of June 13, Gaskell was seen on security footage leaving their room at 3 a.m., looking nervous and hurried. He returned an hour later, his clothes disheveled. This was when the police believed he disposed of Carolyn's body in the ocean. The torn piece of her dress found on the shore confirmed this theory. The arrest took place in the early afternoon of June 20. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angela and Cutie Vi Martinez, along with a team of officers, approached Gaskell at the Marriott Maui Resort. Gaskell was sitting by the pool, pretending to read a magazine. When the officers approached him, he seemed startled but quickly tried to compose himself. "Gaskell Hershey, you are under arrest for the murder of Carolyn Hershey," Detective Kim Linzis announced. Gaskell's face turned pale, and he started to protest, but the officers quickly cuffed him. He was visibly shaken, realizing that his secrets had caught up with him. As Gaskell was led away, the resort guests watched in shock. News of the arrest spread quickly. Carolyn's family, who had been waiting anxiously for any news, were both relieved and devastated. Jessica, Carolyn's sister, broke down in tears upon hearing that her sister's murderer had been caught. The family had suspected Gaskell but hoped they were wrong. The arrest brought a mix of emotions to Carolyn's friends and family. They were glad that justice was being served, but heartbroken over the loss of Carolyn. The case had attracted national attention, with major news outlets like CNN and the New York Times covering the story. People across the country were shocked by the tragic end of what had seemed like a fairy tale romance. With Gaskell in custody, the police prepared to bring the case to trial, hoping to ensure that Carolyn's murderer would be held accountable for his actions. The trial of Gaskell Hershey began on October 10, 2011. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The case had drawn national attention, with news outlets covering every detail. The prosecution was led by Amanda Casatoco, a 45-year-old seasoned prosecutor known for her tough but fair approach. Casatoco presented a strong case, detailing the events leading up to Carolyn's disappearance and the evidence pointing to Gaskell. Casatoco argued that Gaskell had a clear motive to kill his wife. She explained how Carolyn had discovered his affair with Oliver Kamehameha and threatened to expose him. Casatoco showed the security footage of Gaskell leaving his room at 3 a.m. and returning an hour later looking disheveled. She also presented the torn piece of Carolyn's dress found on the shore, which matched the dress she was last seen wearing. The defense was led by Thomas Benihana, a 50-year-old defense attorney known for his smooth-talking and persuasive arguments. Benihana claimed that there was no solid evidence directly linking Gaskell to Carolyn's death. He suggested that Carolyn might have drowned accidentally while swimming early in the morning, as she loved the ocean. Benihana argued that Gaskell was being unfairly targeted due to his relationship with Oliver. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with emotional testimonies from Carolyn's family and friends. Jessica Hershey, Carolyn's sister, gave a tearful statement about her sister's fears and concerns regarding her marriage to Gaskell. The jury was visibly moved by her testimony, and it added a personal touch to the prosecution's case. On November 1, 2011, the jury reached a verdict. Gaskell Hershey was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow. Carolyn's family hugged each other, crying tears of both joy and sadness. They had finally received justice for Carolyn, but the pain of losing her remained. The judge sentenced Gaskell to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gaskell showed little emotion as the sentence was read, staring blankly ahead. His defense team announced plans to appeal the verdict, but the overwhelming evidence made it unlikely that the decision would be overturned. The sentencing brought a sense of closure to Carolyn's family and friends. While they still mourned her loss, they were grateful that her killer was being held accountable. The trial had been a painful but necessary step in their journey to heal and move forward. The case of Carolyn Hershey remained in the public eye for months, a tragic reminder of how secrets and lies can destroy lives. After the trial, life slowly began to return to normal for those involved, but the impact of Carolyn Hershey's murder lingered. Gaskell Hershey started his life sentence at the maximum security prison in Honolulu. He spent his days in solitary confinement, away from other inmates. His appeals were quickly dismissed, and he became a forgotten figure, his once charming personality now a distant memory. Detective Mark Kim Linzis and Officer Angle and Cutie Pie Martinez received commendations for their work on the case. Their dedication and thorough investigation were crucial in bringing Gaskell to justice. Kim Linzis continued his work with the Maui Police Department, becoming a mentor to younger officers. Martinez, inspired by the case, pursued a degree in forensic science to further her career in law enforcement. Oliver Kamehameha, the buzzboy involved with Gaskell, faced a challenging aftermath. Although he was not charged with any crime, the media attention made it difficult for him to find work. He eventually moved to the mainland and changed his name, trying to leave the past behind. He found solace in working with a local charity that helped troubled youth, hoping to make a positive difference in their lives. Jason Nilstone, the Canadian YouTuber who had reported Gaskell's disturbing behavior, returned to his travels. He posted a video on his channel about the experience, emphasizing the importance of speaking up when witnessing suspicious activities. His followers grew in number, appreciating his bravery and commitment to truth. The Marriott Maui Resort also felt the impact of the crime. The management implemented stricter security measures and offered counseling services to staff affected by the incident. They worked to restore the resort's reputation, ensuring the guests felt safe and secure. In the end, while justice was served, the shadow of Carolyn's tragic death affected everyone involved. Her memory lived on through the efforts of her loved ones, and her story became a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the impact of secrets. Our victim, Vicky Davis Goderby, was a 28-year-old marketing executive. She possessed a quick wit and a magnetic personality, which drew people to her effortlessly. Vicky's ambition was evident in her dedication to her career, often working late hours to climb the corporate ladder. Despite her professional success, her personal life remained shrouded in secrecy. The classic Southern rumor mill of Charleston, South Carolina swirled about Vicky's alleged sexual involvement with multiple men, including a married man and even a high school student. These rumors, fueled by local chatter at church and iced tea socials, painted a complex picture of a woman entangled in a web of sex and illicit affairs. The gossipy frenzy surrounding her personal life only intensified the intrigue surrounding Vicky. September of 1998 was a tumultuous time in Charleston. The city was still reeling from the aftermath of Hurricane Bonnie, which had struck the region just weeks prior. The hurricane had caused widespread damage, leaving many residents displaced and struggling to rebuild their lives. Against this backdrop of recovery and resilience, the shocking murder of Vicky Davis Goderby unfolded. As we delve deeper into this case, we will explore the lives of those connected to Vicky, including her husband and mother-in-law, both of who would play a central role in the chilling plot that unfolded. We will examine the evidence, witnesses, and motives behind this heinous crime. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of this true crime tale that gripped the community of Charleston, South Carolina. On a fateful day in September 1998, a peaceful and affluent neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina was shattered by a heinous crime that would forever haunt its residents. The victim, Vicky Davis Goderby, a 28-year-old marketing executive, met a tragic end in her own bedroom, the scene of a brutal act of violence that sent shockwaves through the community. Vicky was a woman of ambition, known for her quick wit and magnetic personality. Her dedication to her career was unwavering, often working late hours to climb the corporate ladder. However, behind her professional success, there were whispers of a controversial sex life that added a layer of intrigue to the case. Rumors circulated about Vicky's alleged involvement with multiple men, including a married individual and even a high school student. These whispers fueled speculation and cast a shadow over her reputation. The discovery of Vicky's lifeless body sent shockwaves through the affluent neighborhood. The crime scene was a chilling sight, with bloodstains and signs of a violent struggle. The murder weapon, a baseball bat, added a horrifying twist to the already perplexing case. The residents, accustomed to a life of comfort and security, were left in a state of disbelief. News of the murder spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of the local media. The community, once shielded by its genteel, classically Southern affluence, found itself thrust into the spotlight as the investigation unfolded. September 1998 became a month etched in the memories of Charleston's residents. The murder of Vicky Davis Goderby had shattered their sense of security, forcing them to confront the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. It was a crime that demanded answers, and the community rallied together, determined to find justice for Vicky. A quiet neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina was shattered by the gruesome murder of 28-year-old marketing executive Vicky Davis Goderby in September of 1998. The police, led by the tenacious detective Sean "Trash Talk" Reilly, wasted no time in their pursuit of justice. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the investigators were met with a chilling sight. Vicky's bedroom, once a place of comfort and solace, had been transformed into a scene of unspeakable violence. Blood splatters adorned the walls, starkly contrasting with the elegant decor that surrounded them. The air was heavy with a sense of dread as the investigators began their meticulous examination. The murder weapon, a baseball bat adorned with the logo of the Florida Marlins, lay discarded near Vicky's lifeless body. Its wooden surface was stained with her blood, a grim reminder of the brutality she had endured. Detective Reilly carefully collected the bat, hoping it would provide crucial clues to unravel this heinous crime. As the investigation unfolded, the police discovered that Vicky's personal life was far from ordinary. Rumors had swirled about her involvement with multiple men, including a married man and even a high school student. These revelations added a layer of complexity to the case, leaving the investigators to question whether her sex life played a role in her tragic demise. Detective Reilly and his team meticulously combed through Vicky's personal belongings, searching for any evidence that could shed light on her murder. They meticulously examined her phone records, revealing a series of cryptic messages and calls from unknown numbers. The investigators reached out to the phone company, hoping to trace the origins of these mysterious communications. Meanwhile, local media outlets began to take notice of the high-profile case. The community was gripped by fear, with residents locking their doors and looking over their shoulders, unsure if the killer lurked among them. As the investigation continued, Detective Reilly and his team tirelessly pursued every lead, determined to bring justice to Vicky and her grieving family. Their efforts would uncover a web of deceit, betrayal, and secrets that would shock the community to its core. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, a 63-year-old woman of Southern charm and impeccable manners, found herself at the center of the investigation into Vicky Davis Goderby's murder. Evelyn, known for her old money background and esteemed reputation, had always presented herself as a pillar of the community. However, beneath her polished exterior, a deep-seated resentment towards her daughter-in-law simmered. The motive for Evelyn's potential involvement in the crime stemmed from her concern for the family's legacy. Vicky's decision not to have children was seen as a threat to the Goderby name, a name that had long been associated with wealth and influence in Charleston, South Carolina. The tension between the two women had been building for months, with Evelyn feeling increasingly marginalized by Vicky's success and independence. As the police interrogated Evelyn, her emotions swung from anger to denial. She vehemently refuted any involvement in the murder, insisting that she had no reason to harm Vicky. However, the mounting evidence against her was difficult to ignore. Detective Sean "Trash Talk" Reilly, the lead investigator on the case, meticulously pieced together the puzzle. He discovered that Evelyn, a baseball fan, had been in possession of a baseball bat similar to the murder weapon. This discovery raised suspicions and pointed towards Evelyn's possible guilt. Furthermore, Reilly uncovered a series of anonymous letters sent to Vicky in the months leading up to her death. These letters contained veiled threats and warnings, suggesting that someone close to her had ill intentions. Handwriting analysis revealed similarities between the anonymous letters and Evelyn's own penmanship. The investigation took a dramatic turn when a neighbor recalled seeing Evelyn's convertible parked near Vicky's house on the day of the murder. This eyewitness account provided a crucial link between Evelyn and the crime scene. As the evidence stacked against her, Evelyn's facade of Southern charm began to crumble. The affluent neighborhoods of Charleston were left in a state of shock, grappling with the realization that darkness can lurk even within the most seemingly idyllic communities. As the investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby unfolded, the spotlight turned towards her husband, Greg Goderby, a successful patent lawyer. Greg, known for his charm and ambition, had always been deeply devoted to his family's reputation. However, the police began to uncover disturbing details that raised questions about his involvement in this heinous crime. One key point of contention was Vicky's decision not to have children. This had been a source of frequent arguments between the couple, leading investigators to explore whether it played a role in the motive behind the murder. The pressure to carry on the family legacy weighed heavily on Greg's shoulders, and it became evident that he saw Vicky's choice as a threat to their future. During the intense police interrogation, Greg's emotions ran high. His responses ranged from anger to defensiveness as he vehemently denied any involvement in his wife's murder. He insisted that he loved Vicky deeply and would never harm her. However, the detectives were not convinced and continued to dig deeper. One crucial piece of evidence that emerged was a series of text messages between Greg and an unidentified woman. These messages vaguely hinted at a secret affair, throwing a new twist into the investigation. The detectives painstakingly analyzed the messages, searching for any clues that could shed light on the motive behind Vicky's murder. Later, the case took a dramatic turn when a new witness came forward. A neighbor reported seeing a suspicious figure lurking near Vicky's house on the night of the murder. This crucial eyewitness account provided a glimmer of hope for the investigators, as it offered a potential break in the case. As the investigation continued, the detectives worked tirelessly to gather enough evidence to bring the killer to justice. The truth behind Vicky's murder remained elusive, but the pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place. The investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby took an unexpected turn when a crucial piece of evidence was unearthed. On a humid and sultry September afternoon, a beachcomber stumbled upon a hidden compartment concealed within a weathered wooden chest buried deep in the sand. To the beachcomber's surprise, the compartment contained a worn diary belonging to the late marketing executive. This diary, which had remained concealed for over 2 weeks, would prove to be a treasure trove of secrets and revelations. As the pages were carefully turned, the shocking truth unfolded before the eyes of the investigators. Vicky's diary chronicled a clandestine world of secret liaisons and forbidden desires, exposing a web of a dozen men Vicky was having sex with at the time of her death. The entries in the diary depicted a life far removed from the polished facade Vicky had presented to the world. Names were mentioned, many of them recognizable figures from the local community. The diary hinted at a married man, a deacon of a local megachurch, a high school student, several men at the local senior center, and even a prominent politician who had been a frequent visitor to the affluent neighborhoods of Charleston, South Carolina. The investigators were astounded by the breadth and audacity of Vicky's secret life. The diary entries painted a vivid picture of a woman who reveled in the thrill of forbidden relationships and outre sexual acts, seemingly unconcerned with the potential consequences. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community, with whispers and speculation spreading like wildfire. As the investigation continued, the police found themselves faced with a daunting task. The diary had opened up a multitude of new leads and suspects, each with their own potential motive for wanting Vicky silenced. The investigators meticulously combed through the diary's pages, cross-referencing names and dates with their existing evidence. The investigators knew that they were now on the brink of unraveling the truth, but little did they know the twists and turns that still lay ahead. In the gripping investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby, a shocking twist emerged that sent shockwaves through the affluent neighborhoods of Charleston, South Carolina in September of 1998. As the police dug deeper into the case, a new suspect emerged, casting doubt on the initial focus of the investigation. Amber Smythe, Vicky's envious secretary, became a person of interest due to her simmering resentment and a trail of secrets that led investigators down a twisted path. Amber, known for her sharp tongue and ruthless ambition, had long harbored jealousy towards Vicky's success and glamorous lifestyle. The police, determined to uncover the truth, delved into Amber's possible motives for murder. During the intense interrogation, Amber's anger and resentment towards Vicky were palpable. However, she vehemently denied any involvement in the crime. As the investigators pressed further, a startling revelation came to light. It was discovered that Amber, under the alias Vanessa Dracula, had been working as a call girl to make ends meet. This was not an uncommon choice. According to the American Center for Family Relationships, 40% of women in their 20s have turned to sex work for extra money. Even more shocking, one of her regular clients was none other than Greg Goderby, Vicky's husband. According to Amber, Greg was looking to have a child with her, then he would adopt the child to be his heir. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. The police began to question the nature of Greg and Amber's relationship and whether it played a role in Vicky's untimely demise. Was Greg's involvement with Amber a motive for murder? Did Amber's jealousy and rage push her to commit such a heinous act? The police meticulously combed through phone records and interviewed witnesses, hoping to uncover the truth. They sought to piece together the puzzle of Vicky's secret sex life, her relationship with Greg, and the possible involvement of Amber. The case took on a life of its own, captivating the public's imagination and leaving them hungry for answers. In a shocking twist, the true identity of the murderer in the high-profile Charleston murder case was revealed. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, the unsuspecting mother-in-law of the victim, Vicky Davis Goderby, was arrested and charged with the brutal killing. This stunning revelation sent shockwaves through the community and left many questioning how such a tragic event could have unfolded. The motive behind this heinous act was uncovered during the course of the investigation. It appeared that Evelyn, driven by a toxic combination of jealousy, confusion, and pride for her son Greg, hatched a twisted plan to protect her family's reputation at all costs. On that fateful day in September of 1998, Evelyn, suffering from undiagnosed dementia, mistook Vicky for Amber Smythe, Vicky's secretary, part-time call girl, and her son's lover. In a moment of confusion and rage, Evelyn unleashed a brutal attack on Vicky, beating her to death with a Florida Marlins baseball bat. Sadly, this situation is not at all uncommon. According to the American Academy of Medicine and Criminal Justice, 18% of all murders in the U.S. are committed by someone with dementia. This tragic case of mistaken identity left investigators and the community reeling with disbelief. As news of Evelyn's arrest spread, the community was left grappling with a mix of relief and disbelief. The Goderby family, once regarded as pillars of the community, now finds themselves at the center of a scandal that has tarnished their reputation. The highly anticipated trial of Evelyn Traylene Goderby, the prime suspect in the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby, captivated the city of Charleston in October of 1999. District Attorney Lars Constable led the prosecution, while defense attorney Harry Huxtable fought to cast doubt on the evidence. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented a compelling case against Evelyn, meticulously outlining the evidence that pointed to her guilt. They showcased the blood-stained baseball bat, the murder weapon that was found near the crime scene. Expert witnesses testified about the DNA analysis that linked Evelyn to the bat. The jury listened intently as the prosecution painted a vivid picture of a calculated and premeditated murder. The defense, on the other hand, sought to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. They questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that it could have been contaminated or mishandled. They also called witnesses who testified to Evelyn's character, painting her as a loving and caring mother who would never commit such a heinous act. The defense argued that the real killer was still at large and that Evelyn was being wrongfully accused. Throughout the trial, the victim's family sat in the courtroom, their emotions palpable. They endured the painful process of reliving their loss as the details of Vicky's brutal murder were recounted. The family's grief was compounded by the shocking revelation that the murder was a case of mistaken identity. Evelyn, suffering from dementia, had tragically killed Vicky, mistaking her for Amber Smythe, her son's lover. As the trial reached its climax, the jury retired to deliberate. The city held its breath, awaiting their decision. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, with some expressing relief that justice had been served, while others questioned whether the death penalty was the appropriate punishment. In the end, the trial of Evelyn Goderby served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. It left the city grappling with questions of justice and the complexities of the human psyche. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of all those involved took unexpected turns. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, now incarcerated at the Charleston Correctional Facility, grappled with the consequences of her actions. The once prestigious Goderby family, known for their old-money Southern charm, was now tarnished by the dark cloud of murder. Their mansion, a symbol of wealth and privilege, stood empty and abandoned, a stark reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. Greg Goderby, burdened by the weight of his mother's crimes, sought solace in therapy to confront his own demons. He struggled to come to terms with the fact that his own mother had taken the life of his wife. Vicky Davis Goderby, Greg, once a successful patent lawyer, found his career in shambles as his reputation became entangled with the scandals surrounding his family. He sought refuge in the arms of Amber Smythe, Vicky's former secretary and his secret lover. The two eventually married, had 3 children, and settled into a modest home in Helena, Montana, far removed from the southern opulence they once knew. The victim's family, devastated by the loss of their beloved Vicky, slowly began to rebuild their shattered lives. They found solace in the support of their community, who rallied around them during their darkest days. The local church held a memorial service in Vicky's honor, where friends and family gathered to share stories and memories of the vibrant young woman whose life was tragically cut short. The investigation and subsequent trial had left an indelible mark on the community of Charleston. The case had captivated the attention of the media, with newspapers and television stations covering every twist and turn of the trial. The local news station, WCBD Channel 2, dedicated a nightly segment to the trial, providing updates on the proceedings and interviews with key players in the case. The trial became the talk of the town, with residents discussing the latest developments over cups of coffee at the local diner, Joe's Cafe. As the years passed, the memory of Vicky Davis Goderby began to fade. The Charleston Correctional Facility, once a hub of activity during the trial, returned to its normal routine. The Goderby mansion, now a mere relic of the past, stood as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. As we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files, we reflect on the chilling plot that unfolded behind closed doors. The tragic murder of Vicky Davis Goderby revealed a tangled web of secrets and lies, leaving no one untouched by its devastating consequences. In a shocking twist, the truth behind Vicky's death unveiled a case of mistaken identity, driven by a combination of jealousy, pride, and the tragic effects of dementia. This case serves as a haunting reminder of the depths to which human nature can descend and the lasting impact it leaves on the lives of those involved. Our unfortunate victim is Lacy Cavalcante, a vibrant and outgoing 23-year-old woman. Lacy, originally from Newark, New Jersey, had relocated to Medford, Oregon to escape a difficult family life. Her father's sentence for 75 years in prison for involvement with the mafia had forced her to leave everything behind and start anew in this quaint town nestled in the Pacific Northwest. Lacy found employment as a waitress at Sherry's Cafe and Pies, a popular chain of diners prevalent in the Pacific Northwest during that time. With its cozy ambience and delectable pies, Sherry's Cafe and Pies had become a favorite spot in Medford for locals and tourists alike. Lacy's dedication and hard work had earned her a commendable reputation among the cafe's patrons. However, behind Lacy's professional success, her personal life was filled with drama and intrigue. Lacy's magnetic personality drew the attention of many suitors, but it was her involvement with these two individuals that captivated the imagination. Her fiery personality. She found herself entangled in 2 separate love affairs, each with its own complexities. The first affair involved a married man, David Cathcart, a 42-year-old man. This clandestine relationship had been ongoing for several months, and the secrecy surrounding it added fuel to the already fiery passion between Lacy and David. The second affair was even more scandalous. Lacy had become romantically involved with a high school cheerleader, Tracy Gartrell, an 18-year-old senior. This forbidden love affair had not yet caught the attention of the local gossip mongers, as its revelation would have defied societal norms and shocked the conservative community of Medford. As we delve deeper into this gripping true crime case, we will uncover the intricate web of relationships and the events involved in Lacy's tragic demise. On a sunny afternoon in June 1987, the small community of Medford, Oregon was rocked by a shocking and brutal crime. Lacy Cavalcante, a vibrant 23-year-old woman with a complicated past, met a tragic end in her own apartment. The discovery of her lifeless body sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, leaving everyone wondering who could have committed such a heinous act. It was on that fateful day, June 22, 1987, that Lacy's life was tragically cut short. Her lifeless body was discovered in the bathroom of her apartment by a close friend, Gina Houseman. Gina, who had been visiting Lacy, was overcome with shock and fear upon making the gruesome discovery. She wasted no time in contacting the authorities, her voice trembling as she described the horrifying scene. The Medford Police Department swiftly responded to the call, cordoning off the area and launching a thorough investigation. The crime scene was meticulously examined for any evidence that could lead to the identification of the perpetrator. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and colleagues, hoping to uncover any leads that could shed light on the motive behind this senseless act of violence. As news of Lacy's murder spread throughout the community, local residents were gripped with fear and disbelief. The once peaceful town of Medford found itself thrust into the spotlight of a real-life crime drama. The case garnered attention from local media outlets, who covered every development with a keen interest. In the coming days, the police would work tirelessly to unravel the mysteries surrounding Lacy's death. The search for answers would take them down a winding path of secrets and deceit, as they delved into the lives of those closest to the victim. The police, headed by Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, swiftly responded to the distressing discovery of Lacy Cavalcante's lifeless body in her apartment bathroom on June 22, 1987. The small city of Medford, Oregon was shaken to its core by this chilling and calculated act of violence. Upon arrival, the officers were greeted by a harrowing scene. The warm and sunny weather outside contrasted sharply with the bloodstains that marred the bathroom floor. It was immediately apparent that Lacy had met a tragic end, having been shot to death. With a sense of urgency, Detective Johnson and Officer Parker meticulously combed through the crime scene, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. They carefully collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any other potential leads that could shed light on the events leading up to Lacy's untimely demise. The investigation was not limited to the confines of the crime scene. The dedicated officers reached out to Sherry's Cafe and Pies, where Lacy had been employed as a successful waitress. They interviewed her co-workers and regular customers, hoping to uncover any information that could prove crucial to solving the case. In their pursuit of justice, the police also sought the assistance of the local community. They appealed to Medford residents, urging them to come forward with any information, no matter how insignificant it may seem. The case quickly captured the attention of the media, with newspapers such as the Oregonian and the Mail Tribune publishing headlines that gripped the public's attention. As the investigation progressed, the officers meticulously documented their findings, creating a detailed timeline of events leading up to Lacy's murder. They cross-referenced witness statements, analyzed phone records, and reviewed surveillance footage from nearby establishments, hoping to catch a glimpse of the perpetrator. Days turned into weeks, and the community anxiously awaited news of a breakthrough in the case. The investigation would take unexpected twists and turns, revealing shocking secrets and hidden motives. Medford would never be the same again, forever marked by the tragic events of that fateful June day. David Cathcart, a 42-year-old local business owner who had been romantically involved with the victim, Lacy Cavalcante, emerged as one of the primary suspects in this chilling murder case that rocked the small community of Medford, Oregon in June of 1987. Described as a man of wealth and influence, Cathcart possessed a magnetic charm that had captivated many in his social circle. However, behind his polished facade lay a dark and deceitful nature that had begun to unravel as the investigation unfolded. The police, led by the diligent Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, focused their attention on Cathcart, delving into his possible motives and unraveling the intricate web of his relationship with the deceased. Interviews with friends and acquaintances revealed a complex and tumultuous affair that had ensnared both Cathcart and Cavalcante. As the investigation progressed, the police discovered a trove of evidence that pointed to Cathcart's possible involvement in the crime. They meticulously examined phone records, uncovering numerous late-night calls between the suspect and the victim in the weeks leading up to the murder. Witnesses also reported seeing Cathcart near the victim's apartment building on the day of the crime.
Adding to the mounting suspicion, the police interrogated Cathcart intensively, employing a combination of psychological tactics and evidence-based questioning. His responses ranged from vehement denial to angry outbursts, with occasional attempts to deflect blame onto others. However, the investigators remained steadfast, determined to uncover the truth behind this heinous act. In their pursuit of justice, the police also reached out to the public for assistance. They released a statement to the local media, urging anyone with information related to the case to come forward. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure on Cathcart intensified. The media spotlight grew brighter, shining a harsh light on his every move. The once charismatic figure found himself thrust into the center of a storm, with public opinion teetering between curiosity and condemnation. Tracy Gartrell, an 18-year-old high school cheerleader, emerged as a person of interest in the murder investigation of Lacy Cavalcante. Tracy, a student at Medford High School, was known for her bubbly personality and her involvement in various extracurricular activities. She was a popular figure among her peers, often seen leading the cheerleading squad during football games and participating in school events. However, beneath Tracy's cheerful demeanor, a darker side was uncovered. The police began to suspect that Tracy's involvement with Lacy went beyond a simple love affair. They believed that Tracy's fear of her secret relationship being exposed might have driven her to commit a heinous act. During the interrogation, Tracy's emotions were on full display. She oscillated between anger, fear, and confusion. Her face flushed with frustration as she vehemently denied any involvement in Lacy's murder. However, her body language betrayed her nervousness as she fidgeted with her fingers and avoided eye contact with the detectives. Detective Janet Johnson, a seasoned investigator with an impressive track record, skillfully probed Tracy for answers. She asked about Tracy's relationship with Lacy, trying to uncover any potential motives or conflicts that could have led to the tragic event. Tracy's responses were evasive, often deflecting the questions or providing vague and contradictory explanations.
As the interrogation intensified, Detective Johnson presented Tracy with the evidence gathered from the crime scene. The blood-stained bathroom floor, the bullet casings, and the fingerprints found at the scene were all meticulously laid out before Tracy. The weight of the evidence seemed to bear down on her, causing her previously confident facade to crumble. Tracy's demeanor shifted from anger to fear as she realized the gravity of the situation. The police had pieced together a timeline of events, placing Tracy near the scene of the crime on the day of the murder. Witnesses had reported seeing her in the vicinity of Lacy's apartment building, raising suspicions about her involvement. The investigation into Tracy's background revealed a troubled past. The pressure to maintain her popularity and status within the high school social hierarchy weighed heavily on her. The fear of her secret affair becoming public knowledge, something that would destroy her reputation in this conservative community, seemed to have pushed her to the edge. The investigation was far from over, but Tracy's involvement in the murder case had become a focal point. The detectives would continue to dig deeper, uncovering more details and pursuing justice for Lacy Cavalcante. As the investigation into the murder of Lacy Cavalcante intensified, a breakthrough moment occurred when the police stumbled upon a hidden stash of letters in the office of David Cathcart, one of the primary suspects. The discovery of these letters sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Medford, Oregon, as their contents revealed a web of manipulation and deceit that few could have imagined. The date was June 27, 1987, a cloudy and overcast day that matched the somber mood of the investigation. Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, leading the charge in solving this heinous crime, meticulously combed through David Cathcart's office, hoping to find any clue that could shed light on Lacy's murder. As they sifted through stacks of papers and files, their eyes fell upon a seemingly innocuous wooden box tucked away in a corner. Opening the box, the detectives were greeted by a trove of letters, each one meticulously preserved with a sense of secrecy. The letters, written in Lacy's elegant handwriting, painted a picture of a woman caught in a dangerous game of love and manipulation. In these missives, apparently written to herself, Lacy detailed her tumultuous affairs with both David Cathcart and Tracy Gartrell, the high school cheerleader who had also become entangled in her web of deceit. The letters revealed a calculated plan, carefully orchestrated by Lacy herself, to pit her two lovers against each other. She played them like puppets, manipulating their emotions and desires to suit her own twisted agenda of a sordid sexual competition. The extent of her control over these two individuals was both chilling and disturbing. As news of the letters spread, the community of Medford was left reeling. The local newspaper, the Medford Tribune, ran front-page headlines proclaiming love and deceit unraveled. Lacy's letters exposed dark secrets. The town's residents, already shocked by the brutal murder of Lacy, now found themselves grappling with the realization that the victim they thought they knew had a hidden side. The police, armed with this newfound evidence, intensified their investigation into David Cathcart and Tracy Gartrell. They sought to uncover the truth behind Lacy's death and bring the puppet master to justice. In the relentless pursuit of justice, the investigation into the tragic murder of Lacy Cavalcante took an unexpected turn as the focus shifted to a seasoned private investigator named Michael Hampy. Hampy, known for his reputation as a truth seeker, had been hired by none other than Rebecca Cathcart, the wife of David Cathcart, one of the primary suspects in this chilling case. The police, driven by their commitment to uncovering the truth, meticulously interrogated Hampy, delving into his possible motives and his role in the murder. Hampy, a man of calm demeanor, stood firmly in his innocence, maintaining his dedication to uncovering the truth behind Lacy's untimely demise. During the intense questioning, Hampy revealed that his involvement in the case stemmed from Rebecca Cathcart's suspicions about her husband's extramarital affair with Lacy. The discovery of this affair had sent shockwaves through the Cathcart household, prompting Rebecca to seek the services of a private investigator to uncover the truth. Hampy, armed with his intuition and a steadfast commitment to his profession, embarked on a thorough investigation. He meticulously combed through phone records, financial transactions, and witness statements, leaving no stone unturned in his quest to uncover the truth. As the investigation progressed, Hampy stumbled upon a series of incriminating letters hidden in David Cathcart's office. These letters, penned by Lacy herself, revealed a web of manipulation and deceit, a sexual competition she had created that had ensnared the lives of those involved. The letters provided a chilling glimpse into the mind of a master manipulator, leaving the police astounded by the depth of deception. In his pursuit of justice, Hampy collaborated closely with Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, sharing his findings and insights. Together, they meticulously pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots between the suspects and the evidence. As the investigation into Lacy Cavalcante's murder continued, the police, armed with the newfound evidence and Hampy's unwavering determination, inched closer to unraveling the truth. With each passing day, the web of deceit surrounding this case began to unravel, revealing a shocking climax. In a stunning turn of events, David Cathcart, the lover of the late Lacy Cavalcante, accused his own wife, Rebecca Cathcart, of orchestrating the murder that rocked the community in June of 1987. The small city was left reeling as the truth behind this chilling crime came to light. The investigation took an unexpected turn when David Cathcart, a 42-year-old influential figure in the community, revealed the dark secrets hidden within his seemingly perfect marriage. In a dramatic confrontation, David claimed that his wife, Rebecca, had been manipulating him for years, using him as a pawn in her sinister quest for power and control. In a press conference set up outside of his sizable house, he accused his wife with the memorable words, "My wife is the puppet master." The police, armed with this shocking revelation, meticulously gathered evidence against Rebecca Cathcart. They uncovered a motive that sent shockwaves through the community, a desire to protect her own reputation in Medford's social scene and to salvage her seemingly perfect marriage. Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, leading the investigation, worked tirelessly to gather evidence that would support David's claims. They meticulously combed through the couple's financial records, phone records, and personal belongings, searching for any piece of evidence that would link Rebecca to the murder. Their efforts paid off when they discovered a hidden stash of letters in David Cathcart's office. These letters, meticulously saved by Rebecca, revealed a web of manipulation and deceit that left the investigators astounded. The letters detailed Rebecca's plan to murder Lacy Cavalcante, her husband's mistress and the woman who threatened to expose her secrets.
The police wasted no time in arresting Rebecca Cathcart, leaving her stunned by the swift turn of events. The evidence against her was overwhelming, leaving little doubt in the minds of the investigators. The victim's family, already devastated by their loss, was left in disbelief as they struggled to comprehend the sinister truth that had been lurking beneath the surface. The trial that followed the shocking murder of Lacy Cavalcante was a highly emotional and closely watched affair. The prosecution, led by attorney Lawson Chambers, meticulously built a compelling case against Rebecca Cathcart, the accused mastermind behind the murder plot. Chambers, known for his tenacity and unwavering pursuit of justice, presented a wealth of evidence to support the charges. Throughout the trial, the courtroom was filled with tension and raw emotions. The victim's family, friends, and members of the community anxiously awaited the verdict, hoping for closure and justice for Lacy. The defense, represented by attorney Robert P. Rothbury, fought fiercely to protect Rebecca's innocence, arguing that the evidence against her was circumstantial and insufficient. During the trial, the prosecution called a series of witnesses to the stand, including Detective Janet Johnson and Officer Linda Parker, who had led the initial investigation. They testified about the meticulous gathering of evidence and the discovery of the hidden stash of letters in David Cathcart's office, which revealed Rebecca's manipulation and deceit. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. They called several character witnesses who testified to Rebecca's good standing in the community and her seemingly perfect marriage to David Cathcart. They argued that the evidence against Rebecca was weak and that there could be other plausible explanations for the crime. The jury, consisting of 12 individuals carefully selected for their impartiality, deliberated for several days. Their task was not an easy one, as the evidence presented was complex and required careful consideration. Finally, on a tense Friday afternoon, the verdict was delivered. Rebecca Cathcart was found guilty of orchestrating the murder of Lacy Cavalcante. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief, tears, and disbelief. The impact of the verdict reverberated through the lives of the victims' friends and family, forever altering their perception of the world. The sentencing, however, left some divided. Rebecca Cathcart was sentenced to only 6 years in prison, a decision that sparked controversy and debate. Some felt that the punishment was too lenient given the severity of the crime and the manipulation involved. Others believed that justice had been served as the evidence against Rebecca was not as concrete as in other cases. Following the dramatic conclusion of the trial, the lives of those involved in the case took unexpected turns. David Cathcart, once a wealthy and influential man, found himself divorced and estranged from his former wife, Rebecca Cathcart. The scandalous affair and subsequent murder had shattered the illusion of his seemingly perfect life. David, now a broken man, retreated from the public eye, seeking solace in the quiet corners of his own remorse. Tracy Gartrell, the high school cheerleader entangled in a love affair, faced a difficult road to redemption. Her once promising future was marred by the scandal, and she struggled to regain her footing. The small town of Medford, known for its tight-knit community, watched as Tracy attempted to rebuild her life, facing the judgment and whispers of her peers. The scars left by her involvement in the affair served as a constant reminder of the consequences of her actions. As the years passed, the small community of Medford slowly moved on from the shocking events of June 1987. The local Sherry's Cafe and Pies, where Lacy had worked, became a symbol of the tragedy that had unfolded, forever etched in the memories of the townspeople. The wounds left by the events of June 1987 may have healed, but the scars remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of seeking justice. And so concludes our episode of True Crime Case Files. This chilling tale of manipulation, deceit, and murder serves as a reminder that darkness can lurk behind the most seemingly perfect facades.
Martha Umbrell was a 46-year-old woman who lived in Franklin, Tennessee. She worked as a librarian at the local high school, Franklin High. Martha was well loved by students and teachers. She always had a warm smile and loved helping students find books that they would enjoy. Martha was passionate about reading and wanted everyone to love books as much as she did. Martha also enjoyed gardening. On weekends, she spent hours tending to her flower beds. Her garden was full of colorful flowers that brightened up her home. Besides books and gardening, Martha's greatest love was her family. She had 3 children, 17-year-old Jace, and 8-year-old twins named Cricket and Boost. Martha was a devoted mother who always put her children first. She made sure they had everything they needed and often helped them with their homework. Martha's husband, Thomas J. Umbrell, was an insurance agent. Though Thomas was often busy with work, he and Martha always made time for family. They often had family dinners and loved watching movies together. In May 2005, Martha was busy planning a summer vacation for her family. They talked about visiting Disney World, which made the kids very excited. At Franklin High School, Martha was preparing for the end of the school year. She helped students return their books and talked to them about summer reading plans. Martha organized a book fair to encourage students to read over the summer. Her colleagues admired her dedication and hard work. Martha's friends described her as kind and caring. She always made time to listen to others and offered help. She was a person who brought people together. Her home was often a gathering place for friends and neighbors. Martha loved hosting barbecues and garden parties where she served homemade dishes and shared gardening tips. Just days before her death, Martha was happy and excited about the future. She talked about planting new flowers in her garden and planning her family's trip to Disney World in the summer. Her tragic death shocked everyone who knew her, leaving a void in the community that loved her so much. On May 18, 2005, the weather in Franklin, Tennessee was clear and cool, the perfect weather for some time outdoors. Around 7:30 a.m., Thomas J. Umbrell, Martha's husband, reported her missing. Martha had not come home from work the previous day. Thomas was worried because it was not like her to disappear without saying anything. Later that afternoon, Ryan Jenkins, a local hiker, decided to take a walk in the nearby park, Franklin Park. It was a popular spot for people to enjoy nature, with many trails and picnic areas. As Ryan was walking along a secluded trail, he noticed something unusual. He saw a shape lying in the bushes off the path. Curious and a bit worried, he went closer to see what it was. To his horror, Ryan realized it was a naked woman's body. He quickly recognized her from the local news as Martha Umbrell, the missing librarian. Ryan was shocked and scared. His hands trembled as he pulled out his cell phone to call 911. He told the operator what he had found and waited there, trying to stay calm until the police arrived. The community was shocked by the news of Martha's death. It was reported on local TV channels like WKRN and in newspapers like the Tennessean. People were scared and heartbroken, as Martha was a well-loved member of the community. As the news spread, more details emerged about the investigation, but the exact cause of Martha's death remained unclear at that point. Everyone waited anxiously for more information from the police. When the police arrived at the crime scene in Franklin Park, it was around 2:00 p.m. on May 18, 2005. Detective Sarah Owens and Officer Mark Davis, known for their careful and thorough work, led the investigation. They carefully approached the area where naked Martha's body was found. The scene was incredibly disturbing. Martha's body showed signs of a violent attack. Detective Owens noted the blood around Martha's body and the severe injuries. It was clear that she had been beaten with a blunt object. Parts of her body were also missing, which was strange and alarming. The officers initially thought she might have been attacked by a wild animal after her death. Ryan Jenkins, a hiker who found Martha, was visibly shaken. He told the police everything he had seen and done since discovering the body. The police thanked him for his help and assured him they would find out what happened. Detective Owens and Officer Davis quickly secured the area to make sure no evidence was disturbed. They called in a team of forensic experts to help gather clues. The experts used tools like cameras to take detailed photos of the scene and special kits to collect samples of blood and other possible evidence. They wore gloves to avoid contaminating anything. The police worked carefully to understand what had happened. They found sleeping pills in Martha's system, indicating she had been drugged before being attacked. This discovery was made by the medical examiner, Dr. Linda Bastardi, who performed an autopsy on Martha's body. Dr. Bastardi was an experienced medical examiner known for her precise work. As they searched the area, the police found a baseball bat with blood on it, hidden under some bushes nearby. This was likely the weapon used to attack Martha. They collected fingerprints and any other DNA they could find on the bat. The scene was very bloody, suggesting a violent struggle. Detective Owens interviewed people in the park and nearby areas to see if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. A few witnesses reported hearing strange noises late in the evening, but didn't think much of it at the time. These small pieces of information were added to the growing file on the case. The local news, including TV stations like WKRN and newspapers like the Tennessean, reported on the case extensively. People in Franklin were freaked out of their minds. Many couldn't believe such a horrific crime had happened in their peaceful town. Detective Owens assured the public that they were doing everything they could to find out who was responsible for Martha's death. As the investigation continued, the police knew they had to act quickly to solve this terrible crime and bring justice for Martha and her family. The first suspect the police investigated was Thomas J. Umbrell, Martha's 61-year-old husband. Thomas worked as an insurance agent and was known for being a devoted husband and father. However, recently he had been showing signs of stress due to financial troubles. Thomas was the one who reported Martha missing when she didn't return home from work. Detective Sarah Owens and Officer Mark Davis brought Thomas in for questioning at the Franklin Police Department. The interview room was small and quiet, with just a table and a few chairs. Thomas looked visibly upset and tired. Detective Owens started by asking him to recount the events of the day Martha went missing. Thomas explained that he last saw Martha when she left for work in the morning. He said he became worried when she didn't come home by dinner time. He tried calling her cell phone, but there was no answer. He called some of her friends and coworkers, but no one had seen her. Finally, he called the police early the next morning. The police asked Thomas about their financial situation, noting the recent stress he had been under. Thomas admitted they were having money problems, but he insisted he would never hurt Martha. He spoke about their plans for a family vacation to Disney World, America's #1 destination for families, and how they were looking forward to spending time together. Thomas's emotional state was evident throughout the interrogation. He was cooperative and answered all questions, but he was also clearly distraught. The police asked if there were any problems in their marriage or if Martha had any enemies. Thomas said their marriage was strong and that they frequently had sex with each other, and he couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt her. The police also searched Thomas' office and car for any signs of involvement in Martha's death. They didn't find anything suspicious. His coworkers described him as a hardworking and honest man, but they had noticed he seemed more stressed than usual lately. Thomas' alibi checked out. He was seen by neighbors at home during the time Martha went missing, and his phone records showed he made calls to friends and family looking for her. While the financial troubles could have been a possible motive, there was no solid evidence linking him to the crime. As the investigation continued, Thomas remained a person of interest, but the police needed more evidence to determine his involvement. The search for Martha's killer continued as the police looked into other potential suspects. The second suspect the police investigated was Samantha Riley, a 27-year-old coworker of Martha's at Franklin High School. Samantha was known for her strong-willed and outspoken personality. Martha had been seen arguing with her a few days before her disappearance, which led to speculation about a possible motive. Detective Sarah Owens and Officer Mark Davis brought Samantha in for questioning at the Franklin Police Department. Samantha arrived looking nervous but determined. The interview room was the same small, quiet space where they had interviewed Thomas. Detective Owens began by asking Samantha about her relationship with Martha. Samantha explained that she and Martha had worked together in the school library for several years. They usually got along well enough, but recently things had gotten tense. Samantha claimed that Martha had started to sexually harass her, making lewd comments and touching her inappropriately, and that she was scared she might lose her job as she reported it. She insisted that their argument was about this harassment. When asked where she was on the day Martha went missing, Samantha said she had gone home after work and stayed there. She lived alone in a small apartment nearby. The police checked her alibi, but of course, no one could confirm that she was home that evening. Detective Owens asked Samantha if she had any involvement in Martha's death. Samantha became defensive and emotional, firmly denying any wrongdoing. She said she was upset about the harassment but would never harm Martha. Samantha's reaction was a mix of anger and fear. She felt like she was being unfairly accused because of the harassment she experienced. The police also searched Samantha's apartment for any signs of involvement in a crime. They found no evidence linking her to Martha's death. However, they did find notes from the school about the harassment complaint, which supported Samantha's story about their argument. Samantha's coworkers were interviewed as well. Some mentioned that she and Martha, known for her earthy sense of humor, had been make more off-color comments more frequently, but none believed Samantha was capable of such violence. They described her as a passionate but kind person who often stood up for herself and others. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the police continued to consider Samantha a suspect due to the recent conflict with Martha. As the investigation moved forward, the police kept searching for more clues. Samantha's case was still open, but without solid evidence. The police needed to look at other potential suspects to solve the mystery of Martha's tragic death. On May 21, 2005, the weather in Franklin, Tennessee was warm and sunny. Around 10 o'clock a.m., Detective Sarah Owens received a call from Officer Mark Davis about new evidence in the case. Dr. Linda Bastardi, who coincidentally was a championship runner, had found something unusual while running in the woods near Franklin Park. She often ran in the mornings and knew the area well. Linda had spotted a torn piece of clothing and a small metal box hidden under some leaves. She immediately called the police, remembering Martha Umbrell's murder. Detective Owens and Officer Davis quickly went to the scene. They thanked her for her help and began examining the new evidence. The torn piece of clothing matched the outfit Martha had been seen wearing on the day she disappeared. Inside the metal box, they found several handwritten notes and some strange drawings. The notes seemed to be written by someone in distress. They mentioned feeling trapped and wanting to escape. The drawings were dark and disturbing, showing violent scenes and strange symbols. Detective Owens carefully bagged the evidence and took it back to the police station for further analysis. They brought in a handwriting expert to compare the notes with samples of writing from people close to the case. The expert concluded that the notes were written by Jace Umbrell, Martha's 17-year-old son. This discovery was significant. Jace had been struggling with severe psychological issues, often experiencing intense hallucinations and delusions caused by his addiction to marijuana. Martha had discovered his obsession with cannibalism and had been trying to get Jace the help he desperately needed, but had faced resistance from insurance companies and healthcare providers. The police decided it was time to question Jace again, this time more thoroughly. The third suspect the police investigated was Jace Umbrell, Martha's 17-year-old son. Jace was a high school student at Franklin High School where his mother worked. His behavior had recently become more erratic, and his family knew he often experienced intense hallucinations and delusions, worsened by his constant pot smoking. Detective Sarah Owens and Officer Mark Davis brought Jace in for questioning at the Franklin Police Department. The interview room was the same small, quiet space used before. Jace appeared anxious and confused, fidgeting in his chair. Detective Owens started by asking Jace about his relationship with his mother. Jace described Martha as a loving and caring mother who always tried to help him. He said she was the only person who understood him and was always there for him. However, he also mentioned feeling a lot of pressure and stress from trying to meet her expectations and his own mental health struggles. When asked about the day his mother went missing, Jace's answers were scattered and inconsistent. He mentioned spending the day at home smoking marijuana and playing video games. The police found his alibi weak and unconvincing. They decided to press further, asking about his recent internet activity. Jace admitted to being part of an online community that discussed cannibalism and other dark topics. He said he was drawn to these discussions because they made him feel understood and provided a sense of belonging. Jace's behavior during the interrogation was erratic. At times, he seemed calm and detached. Other times, he was visibly agitated and upset. The police also searched Jace's room for more evidence. They found disturbing drawings and notes similar to those discovered earlier. These drawings showed violent scenes and strange symbols. The notes revealed Jace's deep psychological distress and fascination with cannibalism. Among his belongings, they also found a blood-stained baseball bat, which matched the weapon used in Martha's murder. Detective Owens asked Jace directly about his involvement in his mother's death. Jace initially denied any involvement but then made an unforgettable statement. "My mom tasted like Lunchables." This shocking statement confirmed the police's worst fears. Jace had not only killed his mother but had also cannibalized her body, believing it would give him her strength and wisdom. With this confession, the police had enough evidence to charge Jace with the murder of his mother, Martha Umbrell. The investigation now turned towards ensuring justice was served for Martha and her grieving family. On May 23, 2005, the weather in Franklin, Tennessee was overcast with a light drizzle, but police were now certain that Jace Umbrell, Martha's 17-year-old son, was responsible for her murder. Jace's confession, combined with the evidence found in his room, painted a clear picture of what had happened. Jace believed that consuming his mother's flesh would give him her strength and wisdom. This delusion stemmed from his marijuana-induced psychosis and was fueled by an online community that glorified cannibalism. Detective Sarah Owens and Officer Mark Davis decided to arrest Jace. They arrived at the Umbrell home around 11 o'clock a.m. Jace was in his room, listening to Eminem and playing Grand Theft Auto. When the police knocked on his door, Jace seemed dazed and confused. Detective Owens informed him that he was under arrest for the murder of his mother, Martha Umbrell. Jace did not resist the arrest. He was calm but appeared to be in a state of shock. As he was led out of the house in handcuffs, the media, including reporters from TV stations like WKRN and newspapers like the Tennessee, gathered outside. Jace shocked everyone by shouting, "My mom tasted like Lunchables." This bizarre statement added to the horror and confusion surrounding the case. Martha's family was devastated by the news. Her husband, Thomas Umbrell, was heartbroken and in disbelief that their son could commit such a heinous act. The community of Franklin, known for its peaceful atmosphere, was deeply shaken. Friends and neighbors struggled to comprehend the tragedy. With Jace in custody, the police continued to gather evidence to ensure a strong case for the upcoming trial. They reviewed his internet history, which revealed extensive interactions with the online cannibalism community. They also found more disturbing drawings and notes that provided insight into Jace's troubled mind. As news of Jace's arrest spread, the local community was filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. People were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but the fact that it was Martha's own son made the situation even more tragic. Detective Owens and Officer Davis worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. They wanted to ensure that justice was served for Martha and her family. The evidence against Jace was overwhelming, and the police were confident that the trial would result in a conviction. The trial of Jace Umbrell began on September 12, 2005, in Franklin, Tennessee. The courtroom was filled with reporters from TV stations and newspapers. The community was eager for justice for Martha Umbrell. The prosecutor, Alan Matthews, was a 45-year-old attorney known for his sharp mind and dedication to justice. He presented the case against Jace, detailing the gruesome evidence and Jace's confession. Matthews argued that Jace, influenced by his severe mental illness and the online cannibalism community, had brutally murdered his mother. He emphasized the premeditation and the horrific nature of the crime, pushing for the maximum penalty. The defense attorney, Rachel Breezy Kelly, a 38-year-old lawyer with a calm demeanor and strong reputation for defending troubled youths, represented Jace. She argued that Jace's actions were a result of his severe mental illness and marijuana-induced psychosis. Breezy Kelly emphasized that Jace needed psychiatric help, not a harsh prison sentence. She presented evidence of Jace's long history of mental health issues and his mother's efforts to get him treatment, which were hindered by insurance companies and healthcare providers. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with a verdict. On September 15, 2005, they found Jace Umbrell guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, mindful of Jace's mental health issues, sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, also mandating psychiatric treatment. The verdict brought mixed reactions. Alan Matthews, the prosecutor, felt justice had been served, ensuring that Jace would be held accountable for his actions. Rachel Breezy Kelly, the defense attorney, expressed relief that Jace would receive psychiatric help, but she had hoped for a lighter sentence. Martha's family was devastated but relieved that the trial was over. Thomas, Jess's father, struggled with the outcome, torn between the love for his son and the horror of losing his wife in such a brutal manner. Friends and neighbors felt the sentence was fair, balancing justice for Martha and the need for Jace to receive treatment. The trial's conclusion left the community in Franklin trying to heal. The media coverage had been extensive, and many hoped that the case would bring attention to the challenges families face when seeking mental health treatment. The Umbrell family, supported by the community, began the long process of moving forward, honoring Martha's memory and coping with the tragic loss. After the trial of Jace Umbrell, life in Franklin, Tennessee, slowly returned to normalcy. The Umbrell family, still reeling from the tragic loss of Martha, tried to piece their lives back together. Thomas Umbrell, Martha's husband, sought solace in his work as an insurance agent, finding distraction and purpose in helping his clients. Jace Umbrell, now serving his sentence at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, received psychiatric treatment as part of his rehabilitation. His case brought attention to the gaps in mental health care, prompting discussions about improving access to treatment for those in need. As time passed, the wounds left by Martha's death began to heal, though the pain of her absence remained. The family found solace in memories of happier times, cherishing the moments they had shared together. Thomas focused on providing a stable and loving home for their surviving children, Cricket and Boost, who struggled to understand the loss of their mother. In the years following Martha's death, the Umbrell family found moments of peace and healing amidst the pain. They honored Martha's memory through acts of kindness and service, keeping her spirit alive in their hearts. The community of Franklin continued to offer support, standing together in solidarity against the darkness that had touched their lives. Harold Hal Griffin was a man many people in Kokomo, Indiana, knew well. At 63 years old, he had spent over 3 decades managing a grocery store chain that was popular in the community. Hal had a way of making people feel welcome, whether they were customers or employees. His friendly smile and sharp business skills made him respected in his hometown. After retiring, Hal moved to Prescott, Arizona, in search of a quieter life. Prescott, known for its mild weather and beautiful landscapes, was a popular destination for retirees. Hal settled into this peaceful town, spending his days gardening, attending local events, and relaxing. But Hal's life wasn't as simple as it appeared. His marriage to Mary had been troubled for years, mostly because of her declining health. Mary had been diagnosed with brain cancer, which had taken a toll on both of them. Hal, feeling lonely and emotionally drained, started looking for comfort elsewhere. He began seeing other men for sex, but only a few close friends knew about this very secret part of his life. Hal found particular comfort in sexual relationships with 2 other men, Leonard Lenny Bartholf and Pete Peterson. Lenny, a 60-year-old retired banker from Minnesota, had been Hal's first male lover. Lenny was deeply attached to Hal, believing they would eventually be together once Mary's health declined further. The third person in this love triangle was Pete Peterson, a 56-year-old insurance adjuster who also lived in Prescott. Pete's relationship with Hal was more casual, with the 2 meeting every now and then for quick sex, but he secretly hoped that Hal would leave both Mary and Lenny to start a new life with him. In the days leading up to his death, Hal seemed preoccupied. He had confided in a close friend that he was considering making big changes in his life. Hal was torn between his responsibilities at home and his desires for freedom and happiness. Unfortunately, his hopes for a fresh start would be cut short by the tragic events that soon unfolded. On the afternoon of July 15, 2011, Prescott, Arizona, was experiencing its typical summer weather, hot and dry, with temperatures reaching the mid-90s. It was around 2:30 p.m. when Mary Griffin, Hal's wife, realized she hadn't seen him all day. This was unusual, as Hal usually spent his mornings tending to his garden or reading the newspaper on the porch. Concerned, Mary decided to check the house, starting with the kitchen, where Hal often prepared their lunch. As she entered the kitchen, Mary was met with a scene of horror. Hal was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, his body still and lifeless. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and abdomen. The kitchen was in disarray, with broken dishes and overturned chairs scattered around the room, evidence of a violent struggle. The sight overwhelmed Mary, who was already frail due to her illness. Her initial reaction was shock, followed by a wave of panic. Struggling to maintain her composure, Mary managed to dial 911, her voice trembling as she reported what she had found. The 911 operator, sensing the urgency in Mary's voice, immediately dispatched police and emergency medical services to the Griffin residence. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Hal had been dead for several hours by the time they arrived. Mary, distraught and in shock, was taken to the hospital as a precaution. She was unable to provide much information to the authorities, her mind struggling to process the horrific scene she had just witnessed. The discovery of Hal's body sent shockwaves through the quiet Prescott community. Neighbors, who were used to the tranquility of their retirement paradise, were suddenly thrust into the middle of a murder investigation. As news spread, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Something terrible had happened in the Griffin household, and the search for answers was just beginning. Detective Robert Bob Jensen arrived at the Griffin residence on the afternoon of July 15, 2011. The summer heat was intense, with temperatures soaring into the mid-90s, typical for Prescott, Arizona in July. Jensen was a seasoned investigator with the Prescott Police Department, known for his methodical approach and keen attention to detail. He had seen his fair share of crime scenes, but the brutal nature of this one immediately struck him as a crime of passion. The kitchen was in chaos. Blood splattered the walls and floor, and a pool of blood surrounded Hal Griffin's lifeless body. A kitchen knife, the apparent murder weapon, lay nearby, covered in blood. The scene suggested a violent struggle, broken dishes, An overturned chair and scattered items indicated that Hal had fought desperately for his life. Jensen carefully stepped around the evidence, noting every detail. He knew that every piece of the puzzle could be crucial in solving this case. Jensen was joined by Officer Ophelia Lopez, a young but sharp member of the team, who had a reputation for her quick thinking. Together, they began their initial assessment of the scene. Jensen noticed that the house showed no signs of forced entry, which led him to believe that Hal had known his attacker. The struggle appeared to have been contained to the kitchen, with no evidence of the fight spilling into other parts of the house. As the detectives worked, forensic technicians arrived to document the scene. They took photographs, collected samples of the blood, and dusted for fingerprints. The technicians also swabbed the knife for DNA evidence, hoping to find something that would lead them to the killer. Jensen observed as they bagged the knife and other key pieces of evidence, knowing these would be crucial in the investigation. Outside, the neighbors were beginning to gather, whispering among themselves. Prescott was a quiet town, and a murder like this was a rare and shocking event. As Jensen stepped out to speak with some of the onlookers, he was met with a mix of fear and curiosity. Many knew Hal as a friendly, easygoing man, making the violent nature of his death even more unsettling. Back inside, Jensen and Lopez continued their examination. They were particularly interested in the timeline of events. When had Hal last been seen alive, and who could have had access to the house during that time? Jensen made a mental note to interview Hal's wife, Mary, as soon as she was able to speak, knowing that her testimony could provide crucial insights. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was clear to Jensen: this was no random act of violence. The ferocity of the attack and the lack of forced entry pointed to a killer with a personal connection to Hal, someone who had been driven by strong emotions. The task now was to uncover who that person was and why they had turned to murder. Leonard Lenny Bartholf, 60, was the first person of interest in the investigation. Lenny had been living with Hal and Mary Griffin for nearly a year under the pretense of being a down-on-his-luck friend whom Hal had taken in. In reality, Lenny was much more than a houseguest. He was Hal's secret gay lover. Their relationship had been ongoing for several years, beginning back in Indiana before Hal's retirement. Lenny, a retired banker, was known for his meticulous and conservative nature. He had worked at the same bank for 40 years before retiring to Arizona. Lenny had always been a reserved and disciplined man, qualities that had served him well in his banking career. However, beneath this calm exterior, Lenny was deeply in love with Hal and harbored intense feelings of jealousy and insecurity. He had hoped that once Mary's health declined further and she succumbed to her cancer, he and Hal could be together openly. Lenny was protective of Hal, often to the point of possessiveness, and he had struggled with the knowledge that Hal had sexual relationships with other men, particularly Pete Peterson. Detective Robert Jensen and Officer Ophelia Lopez brought Lenny in for questioning on July 16, the day after Hal's body was found. The interrogation took place in a small, windowless room at the Prescott Police Department. Lenny appeared nervous but composed, his hands shaking slightly as he answered their questions. Jensen, who was known for his calm yet probing interrogation style, began by asking Lenny about his relationship with Hal. Lenny hesitated but eventually admitted to their romantic involvement, his voice cracking as he spoke. He insisted that he loved Hal deeply and would never hurt him. Jensen then asked Lenny about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lenny claimed that he had been asleep in his room and had not heard anything unusual. However, Jensen noticed that Lenny's story had some inconsistencies. For example, Lenny couldn't explain why he hadn't heard the struggle that had clearly taken place in the kitchen, just a few rooms away. When pressed further, Lenny became agitated, raising his voice and demanding to know why he was being accused of something so horrible. The detectives also asked Lenny about his relationship with Pete Peterson, Hal's other lover. Lenny's demeanor shifted noticeably at the mention of Pete. His jealousy was evident as he spoke bitterly about Pete, accusing him of trying to come between him and Hal. Lenny's resentment towards Pete was clear, and it gave the detectives a possible motive: jealousy and fear of losing Hal. Despite Lenny's emotional responses and the inconsistencies in his story, he denied any involvement in Hal's murder. The detectives released him after several hours of questioning, but he remained a key suspect. Jensen couldn't shake the feeling that Lenny was hiding something, and he knew they needed more evidence to either prove or disprove Lenny's involvement in the crime. The second suspect in Hal Griffin's murder was his wife, Mary Griffin. At 61, Mary had once been a vibrant and active woman. known around Prescott for her involvement in local church activities and charity work. However, her life had taken a drastic turn recently after being diagnosed with brain cancer. The illness had left her weak and dependent on Hal for nearly all her daily needs. Though Mary had always been sweet-natured, the cancer had taken a toll on her memory and cognitive abilities, often leaving her confused and forgetful. Despite her illness, Mary's love for Hal was undeniable. Their marriage had transitioned to become more of a caretaker relationship, with Hal dedicating much of his time to looking after her. However, those close to the couple had noticed that Mary seemed troubled in the months leading up to Hal's death. She had moments of clarity where she appeared aware that something was amiss in her marriage, but she couldn't fully grasp the reality of Hal's secret life. Detective Robert Jensen and Officer Ophelia Lopez decided to question Mary on July 17, 2011, 2 days after Hal's body was found. They visited her at the hospital where she was being treated for the moment. A hospital was a quiet, sterile environment, far removed from the violence seen at the Griffin home. Mary was resting in bed, looking frail and tired, but she managed a weak smile when the detectives entered the room. Jensen approached the interview with care, knowing that Mary's mental state could affect her responses. He began by asking her about her relationship with Hal. Mary spoke lovingly of her husband, recalling their early years together and how he had always been there for her during her illness. She mentioned how Hal had become more distant recently, often leaving the house for long periods without explaining where he had been. However, she dismissed these thoughts, attributing them to her illness rather than anything Hal had done. The detectives then asked Mary about the night of the murder. Mary struggled to remember specific details, a common symptom of her condition. She couldn't recall hearing anything unusual that night and was genuinely shocked when she learned of Hal's death. Tears welled up in her eyes as she expressed disbelief that someone could harm the man who had cared for her so lovingly. When asked if she knew about Hal's relationships with other men, Mary seemed confused. She hesitated, then shook her head, saying that Hal had always been devoted to her. However, Jensen noted that Mary's confusion could be masking deeper emotions, perhaps a buried awareness of Hal's affairs or a fear that she wasn't the only one in his life. Despite her frail condition, Mary remained a suspect, if only because she was Hal's wife and had the closest relationship with him. However, the detectives knew that without clear evidence or a more coherent testimony, it would be difficult to build a case against her. For now, they would have to keep looking for more concrete leads. The third suspect in Hal Griffin's murder was Pete Peterson, a 56-year-old insurance adjuster who had been living in Prescott for several years. Pete was known in the community for his calm, steady demeanor and his predictable routine. He was the kind of man who enjoyed a simple, quiet life, and he was often seen at local diners like Denny's or grabbing coffee at Dutch Brothers. Pete's involvement in a sexual relationship with Hal was not well known, but those who were aware of their relationship described it as mainly being casual sex, unlike Hal's more intense connection with Lenny Bartholf. Pete had been seeing Hal for about a year, meeting discreetly for sex whenever and wherever they could. To Pete, their relationship was more about companionship and physical comfort than deep emotional ties. He knew about Lenny and even saw him as competition, but he wasn't overly concerned. Pete had pushed Hal to leave Mary and Lenny behind and start fresh with him, but Hal had always been hesitant to make such a drastic move. On July 18, 2011, 3 days after Hal's body was discovered, detectives Robert Jensen and Ophelia Lopez brought Pete in for questioning. Pete arrived at the Prescott Police Department dressed neatly, his expression calm but wary. The detectives, aware of Pete's steady personality, expected him to be cooperative, but were prepared to dig deeper if needed. Jensen began the interview by asking Pete about his relationship with Hal. Pete was upfront about their sexual involvement, describing it as casual and admitting that they had seen each other off and on for sex for about a year. He spoke in a measured tone, careful with his words, and avoided giving too much detail about their relationship. When Jensen asked if Pete had known about Lenny, Pete's face hardened slightly. He acknowledged that he knew about Lenny, but claimed he didn't see him as a serious rival. Hal was his own man, Pete said. He loved who he loved. The conversation then turned to the night of the murder. Pete explained that he had been home alone, watching television, specifically reruns of Law and Order, Special Victims Unit on USA Network, and had gone to bed early. He insisted that he hadn't seen Hal that day and that they hadn't spoken for a few days before the murder. His alibi was simple, but the detectives couldn't find anything to directly contradict it. When pressed about his feelings towards Hal and the possibility of Hal leaving him for Lenny, Pete's calm exterior began to crack. He admitted that the idea of losing Hal had upset him, but he quickly composed himself, stating that he wasn't the kind of person to act out of anger. However, Jensen noticed a flicker of emotion in Pete's eyes, something that hinted at a deeper, more complex relationship with Hal than Pete was willing to admit. After several hours of questioning, the detectives released Pete. Although he had remained mostly calm and cooperative, they were left with a sense that there was more to his story. Pete's steady demeanor, while reassuring, also made it difficult to gauge his true feelings. The detectives knew they needed to keep an eye on Pete as they continued to unravel the tangled relationships surrounding Hal Griffin's death. On July 20, 2011, 5 days after Hal Griffin's body was discovered, the Prescott Police Department received a crucial lead in the case. The day was hot and dry, typical for an Arizona summer, with temperatures hovering around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Detective Robert Jensen had just finished reviewing the initial reports when a call came in from a local hardware store, True Value, located off Gurley Street. The store manager reported that someone had found something unusual in the dumpster behind the store. Jensen and his partner, Officer Ofelio Lopez, quickly drove to the scene. The hardware store was a familiar spot in Prescott, known for its friendly service and wide selection of tools and supplies. When they arrived, the manager led them to the back of the store where the dumpsters were located. A smell of garbage and the buzz of flies filled the air as Tom pointed to a large black trash bag sitting on top of the pile. Inside the bag, Jensen and Lopez found a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. The shirt was torn and soaked with blood, clearly connected to the violent crime that had taken place in Hal Griffin's home. The gloves were made of latex, the kind commonly used for cleaning or handling chemicals, but they were also smeared with dried blood. Jensen carefully bagged the items as evidence and immediately had them sent to the crime lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, the detectives reviewed the security footage from the hardware store. Unfortunately, the camera angle didn't capture the exact spot where the bag had been dumped, but it did show a shadowy figure moving near the dumpsters late at night. The footage was grainy, and the person's identity was unclear, but it gave the detectives a timeline for when the evidence was likely discarded. A few days later, the lab results came back, confirming that the blood on the shirt and gloves matched Hal Griffin's DNA. This was a significant breakthrough in the case, suggesting that the person who dumped the bag had been directly involved in the murder. The discovery also indicated that the killer had attempted to dispose of evidence in a hurry, possibly panicking after the crime. The police now had a strong piece of evidence that could link the suspects to the crime. Jensen and Lopez knew they were closing in on the truth, but they still needed to determine who had thrown the bag into the dumpster and why. The investigation intensified as they worked to connect this new evidence to one of the suspects they had already questioned. On July 24, 2011, just over a week after Hal Griffin's body was discovered, the Prescott Police Department made a breakthrough in the case. The analysis of the blood-stained shirt and gloves found in the True Value hardware store dumpster had revealed something crucial, a partial fingerprint on one of the latex gloves. After running the print through the national database, it matched Leonard Lenny Bartholf, Hal's longtime lover. Lenny Bartholf, a 60-year-old retired banker, had been living with Hal and his wife, Mary, under the guise of being a down-and-out man Hal had taken in. In reality, Lenny and Hal had been involved in a secret sexual relationship for several years, a fact that was unknown to most people in Prescott. Lenny was deeply in love with Hal and believed that once Mary's health deteriorated, they would be together openly, but Lenny had grown increasingly paranoid about Hal's other relationships, particularly with Pete Peterson, the calm, placid insurance adjuster who had been a casual sex partner of Hal's. On the night of July 15, Lenny had confronted Hal in the kitchen of their Prescott home. Lenny had heard rumors that Hal was planning to leave him and start a new life with Pete. Fueled by jealousy and fear of losing the only person he truly loved, Lenny demanded answers. Hal, feeling cornered, admitted that he had considered leaving Prescott with Pete. This confession pushed Lenny over the edge. In a fit of rage and heartbreak, he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Hal multiple times in the chest and abdomen. After the murder, Lenny panicked. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, he attempted to clean up the scene, but the mess was too overwhelming. In his haste, he grabbed the blood-stained shirt and gloves, stuffed them into a trash bag, and drove to the True Value hardware store, where he dumped the bag in the dumpster. He hoped this would cover his tracks, but the discovery of the items led the police straight to him. On the afternoon of July 24, the police arrived at the Griffin home with an arrest warrant for Lenny. He was in the backyard, tending to Mary's garden, when detectives Robert Jensen and Ophelia Lopez approached him. Lenny didn't resist arrest. He was visibly shaken but showed no surprise when they informed him of the charges. He quietly admitted to the crime, saying he hadn't meant to kill Hal but couldn't control his anger. Hal's family, particularly Mary, was devastated by the arrest. Mary, still battling brain cancer, was in shock, unable to comprehend that her husband had been living a double life and that Lenny, whom she had trusted, was his killer. The news spread quickly through Prescott, shocking the small community that had known Hal as a friendly, outgoing retiree. The arrest of Lenny Barfold marked the beginning of the end for this tragic case. The police had pieced together the puzzle, revealing a story of love, jealousy, and betrayal that had led to a deadly outcome. But the full story would only come to light in a courtroom, where Lenny would face justice for his actions. The trial of Leonard Lenny Barfold began on October 3, 2011, in the Yavapai County Courthouse in Prescott, Arizona. The case had garnered attention, not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also due to the scandalous details of Hal Griffin's secret life that had come to light. The courtroom was packed with locals eager to delve into the story of love, betrayal, and murder in this quiet retirement community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James McLean, a seasoned lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach in the courtroom. McLean, a 58-year-old with a reputation for being tough but fair, laid out a compelling case against Lenny. He argued that Lenny's actions were premeditated, driven by jealousy and a deep fear of abandonment. McLean detailed how Lenny had lived a double life, pretending to be a homeless man taken in out of charity, while secretly maintaining a romantic relationship with Hal. He painted a picture of a man who couldn't bear the thought of losing Hal to Pete Peterson, and in a fit of rage, had murdered the very person he claimed to love. The defense, led by public defender Frankie Clark, took a different approach. Clark, a 42-year-old lawyer with a calm demeanor, argued that Lenny's actions were not premeditated, but were instead the result of a momentary lapse in control. She portrayed Lenny as a man who had been deeply in love, confused, and heartbroken by Hal's admission that he was planning to leave him. Clark emphasized Lenny's clean record, his service at the bank for 40 years, and his role as a quiet, disciplined member of society who had never shown signs of violence before this incident. She appealed to the jury's sympathy, asking them to consider the emotional turmoil that had led Lenny to commit the crime. Throughout the trial, Hal Griffin's family watched the proceedings with a mix of sadness and anger. Mary Griffin, frail and devastated, sat quietly as the details of her husband's double life were exposed to the world. The betrayal was almost as painful as the murder itself, and her emotions were evident as she listened to the arguments. After 2 weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury reached a verdict. On October 17, 2011, Leonard Barfold was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury believed that while Lenny's actions were driven by emotion, they were still deliberate and intentional. Judge Martin Harris sentenced Lenny to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that reflected the seriousness of the crime but also took into account Lenny's previously clean record and the emotional circumstances surrounding the case. The sentence brought a sense of closure to Hal Griffin's family, though it didn't erase the pain of losing him. For Mary Griffin, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but the cost had been the shattering of the life she thought she knew. As for the Prescott community, the trial and its outcome left a lasting impact, a reminder that even in the most peaceful places, dark secrets can lead to tragic consequences. After the trial, life for those involved in the tragic events of July 2011 changed dramatically. Laura Samuels was a 34-year-old marketing executive living in Sacramento, California. She worked at a big company called Bright Ideas Marketing. Laura was well known at work for her ambitious nature and drive to succeed. She balanced her busy job with a warm and friendly personality, which made her popular among her coworkers and friends. Laura loved outdoor activities, especially hiking and camping. She often took trips to Yosemite National Park and Lake Tahoe. She was also a member of a local book club, where she enjoyed discussing her favorite novels by the author Joyce Lehman. Laura's friends described her as kind-hearted and always ready to help others. She had a bright smile that could light up a room. In June 2010, Laura was planning a special camping trip with her family. She and her husband, Carl, along with their 2 children, Ponderosa, age 10, and Velveeta, age 8, were excited about their upcoming adventure.
Laura had already packed their tent, sleeping bags, and food supplies. She had even bought new hiking boots from L.L. Bean for the trip. Laura's children were looking forward to roasting marshmallows and telling stories around the campfire. At work, Laura was expecting a big promotion. Her boss had hinted that she might become the new head of the marketing department. This promotion was a dream come true for Laura, who had worked hard for many years. She was excited about the future and looking forward to the new challenges and opportunities it would bring. Laura was also very close to her family. Her parents lived in nearby Vacaville and often visited to spend time with their grandchildren. Laura's sister, Emily, lived in Los Angeles, but they kept in touch regularly through phone calls and emails. Laura cherished these relationships and made sure to stay connected with her loved ones. In the days before her death, Laura was full of life and excitement. She was looking forward to the camping trip and the possibility of a promotion at work. Her friends and family remember her as a loving and caring person who always put others first. Laura's tragic death was a shocking and heartbreaking loss to everyone who knew her. On the morning of June 14, 2010, Carl Samuels woke up early to get ready for work. It was around 7:00 a.m., and the sun was shining brightly in Sacramento, California. Carl noticed that his wife, Laura, was not in bed. Thinking she might be in the kitchen, he went downstairs. To his horror, he found Laura's lifeless body in the living room. Laura had been beaten to death with a hairbrush. Her face was bruised, and there were signs of a struggle. Carl immediately called 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had found. He was in shock, unable to believe that his loving wife was gone. The 911 operator, calmly taking down details, dispatched police and emergency services to the Samuels home. Carl sat by Laura's body, tears streaming down his face, waiting for help to arrive. He felt a mix of grief, confusion, and disbelief. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics confirmed that Laura was dead, and police officers quickly secured the area. Carl was visibly shaken and struggled to answer questions. He kept repeating how much he loved Laura and how he couldn't understand who would want to hurt her. The detectives noted his distress, but also kept in mind that in such cases, the spouse is often a person of interest. Outside, neighbors started to gather, curious about the police presence. The news quickly spread through the community. Local TV stations, such as KCRA3, began reporting on the incident, mentioning Laura's name and describing her as a well-liked member of the community. By late morning, the house was a hub of activity. Forensic experts arrived to collect more evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, took samples from the crime scene, and carefully bagged the hairbrush as evidence. Every detail was documented meticulously. As the day went on, the reality of Laura's death began to sink in for her friends and family. Calls and messages poured in, expressing shock and sorrow. The news of her death left everyone who knew her in a state of disbelief, trying to come to terms with the tragic loss of a beloved wife, mother, and friend. The Sacramento police responded quickly to the 911 call on June 14, 2010. Within minutes, officers and emergency responders arrived at the Samuels home. Detective Patricia Johnson and her partner, Detective Mark Hernandez, led the investigation. Detective Johnson, known for her sharp eye and dedication, and Detective Hernandez, famous for his thorough and careful work, immediately took charge. The crime scene was a disturbing sight. Laura Samuels lay on the living room floor, clearly beaten to death with a hairbrush found nearby. Blood was spattered on the carpet, and furniture was knocked over, showing signs of a violent struggle. The scene was otherwise clean, suggesting that the attacker might have tried to cover their tracks. The detectives began by securing the area to ensure no one could disturb the evidence. They carefully documented everything, taking photographs and making detailed notes. Forensic experts arrived shortly after to collect physical evidence. They dusted for fingerprints on the hairbrush, furniture, and door handles. They also took samples of blood and other potential DNA evidence from the scene. Detective Johnson spoke with Carl Samuels, who was visibly shaken and in tears. She asked him about the events leading up to the discovery of Laura's body. Carl explained that he had woken up early to get ready for work and found Laura in the living room. He had no idea who could have done this to her. While Johnson interviewed Carl, Detective Hernandez examined the rest of the house. He looked for any signs of forced entry, but found none. This suggested that Laura might have known her attacker and let them in. Hernandez noted the absence of defensive wounds on Laura's hands, which indicated she was caught off guard. Neighbors began to gather outside, watching the police activity. Some were interviewed by the detectives, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that morning.
The community was shocked and scared, as Laura was well-liked and her death was a terrible blow to everyone who knew her. By noon, the detectives had collected all the evidence they could find. They bagged the hairbrush and other items for further analysis at the crime lab. The coroner arrived to take Laura's body for an autopsy, which would provide more details about the time and cause of death. Detective Johnson and Hernandez spent the rest of the day reviewing the evidence and planning their next steps. They knew they had a difficult case ahead of them, but were determined to find justice for Laura and her family. Carl Samuels, the husband of Laura Samuels, was the first suspect in the investigation. Carl was 37 years old and worked as a software developer. He was known to be intelligent, but also quite introverted, often spending more time with his computer than with people. Carl was a devoted husband, but in recent months he had become distant and stressed, which friends noticed. The police brought Carl in for questioning at the Sacramento Police Department on June 15, 2010. Detective Patricia Johnson and Detective Mark Hernandez led the interrogation. Carl appeared exhausted and heartbroken. His eyes were red from crying, and he seemed genuinely distraught over Laura's death. Detective Johnson started by asking Carl about his relationship with Laura. Carl explained that they had been married for 12 years and had 2 children, Ponderosa, age 10, and Velveeta, age 8. He admitted that their marriage had been strained lately due to their decision to participate in a wife swap sex fantasy. Carl had pushed Laura to participate in this fantasy with another couple, Jessica and Kenneth Planters. This obsession had caused tension between him and Laura. When asked about the night of Laura's death, Carl stated that he had been working late on a state government contract for his job at a well-known tech company, TechWave. He said he went to bed around midnight and didn't wake up until the next morning when he found Laura's body. His alibi was weak since he had been home alone during the time of the murder. Detective Hernandez asked Carl about his relationship with Jessica Planters. Carl admitted that he found Jessica attractive and that they had sex with each other many times, but he insisted that nothing that had nothing to do with the murder. He was visibly uncomfortable and kept fidgeting during this part of the questioning. The detectives noted Carl's stress and anxiety, but also his apparent grief. They asked him about any recent arguments with Laura. Carl mentioned that they had fought about the wife swap fantasy and his interest in sexual experimentation a few days before her death. Laura had been upset and told him she didn't want to participate anymore, which had frustrated Carl. Despite his emotional state, Carl cooperated fully with the police. He provided access to his phone and computer for further investigation. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez were cautious but still considered him a suspect. They needed more evidence to either confirm his involvement or clear him of suspicion. As the questioning concluded, Carl was allowed to go home but was instructed not to leave town. The detectives continued to gather information, knowing they had to explore all possible angles in the case to find the truth about who killed Laura Samuels. The second suspect in the investigation was Jessica Planters, a 32-year-old yoga instructor. Jessica was outgoing and charismatic, known for her sociable nature. She taught yoga at a popular studio in downtown Sacramento called Zen Flow Yoga. Many people in the community admired her free-spirited attitude and ability to connect with others. Jessica was part of the wife swap arrangement with Laura and Carl Samuels and her husband, Kenneth. She had developed an unhealthy obsession with Carl and had been trying to convince him to leave Laura for her. Detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez brought Jessica in for questioning on June 16, 2010, at the Sacramento Police Department. Jessica arrived wearing casual yoga attire, looking calm and composed. Detective Johnson began by asking Jessica about her relationship with Carl. Jessica openly admitted that loved sexually experimenting with Carl and had strong feelings for him. She said she believed Carl felt the same way but was torn because of his marriage to Laura. When questioned about the night of Laura's death, Jessica claimed she was at home with her husband, Kenneth. She said they had watched a movie and gone to bed early. However, Detective Hernandez pointed out that there were no witnesses to confirm her alibi, making it weak. Jessica then talked about the wife swap arrangement. She explained that it was Carl's idea and that Laura had reluctantly agreed. Jessica saw it as a great opportunity to have sex with Carl. She admitted that she had been trying to convince Carl to leave Laura, but she denied any involvement in Laura's death. The detectives noticed that while Jessica was cooperative, she seemed to be hiding something. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the seriousness of the situation. They pressed her about her obsession with Carl and whether it could have driven her to harm Laura. Jessica maintained her innocence, insisting she would never hurt anyone. During the interrogation, Jessica's phone records were examined. They revealed multiple calls and messages to Carl, including some sent on the night of the murder. This evidence raised further suspicion, as it showed Jessica's intense interest in Carl. Despite her cooperation, Jessica's obsession with Carl and her weak alibi made her a strong suspect. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to either implicate or exonerate her. They continued to investigate her background, looking for any clues that could link her to Laura's murder. As the questioning ended, Jessica was allowed to leave but was instructed not to leave town. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez remained determined to uncover the truth, knowing that Jessica's possible involvement in the crime needed to be thoroughly explored. On June 18, 2010, 4 days after Laura Samuel's tragic death, new evidence emerged that gave the investigation a crucial breakthrough. That morning, it was cloudy and cool in Sacramento. Detective Patricia Johnson received a call from a neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Turner, who lived 2 houses down from the Samuels' home. Mrs. Turner mentioned she had found something unusual while walking her dog in a nearby park called Land Park. Mrs. Turner had noticed a discarded bag under a bush near a picnic area. Inside the bag, she found a pair of bloody gloves and a smartphone. She immediately called the police, and Detectives Johnson and Hernandez arrived at the scene within 30 minutes. They carefully collected the bag and its contents, placing them in evidence bags to avoid contamination. Back at the Sacramento Police Department, the detectives examined the new evidence. The bloody gloves were sent to the crime lab for DNA analysis. The smartphone, which was locked, was taken to the tech department to be unlocked and analyzed. Detective Hernandez noted the phone was a newer model, an iPhone 4, which had just been released a few weeks earlier. While waiting for the results, the detectives reviewed their notes on the case. The bloody gloves suggested the killer had tried to dispose of evidence far from the crime scene. The smartphone could potentially belong to the killer or someone connected to the crime. Later that afternoon, the crime lab called with the DNA results. The blood on the gloves matched Laura Samuel's, but there was also another DNA profile on the inside of the gloves. The profile did not match Carl Samuel's, which was a significant finding. The tech department also managed to unlock the smartphone. It was registered to Jessica Planters, the yoga instructor and second suspect. The detectives found numerous messages and call logs between Jessica and Carl, including some from the night of the murder. Additionally, there were messages that showed Jessica's increasing frustration and jealousy toward Laura. Detective Johnson and Hernandez were surprised by this new evidence. The messages revealed that Jessica had been trying to manipulate Carl into deleting Laura, but her efforts had been unsuccessful. They now had a stronger case against Jessica, as the gloves and the smartphone linked her more directly to the crime. The detectives planned their next steps carefully. They knew they needed to bring Jessica back in for questioning with this new evidence. The case was starting to come together, but they still needed to ensure all details were thoroughly investigated. As the day ended, the detectives felt a renewed sense of purpose. The new evidence had provided a crucial lead, and they were determined to follow it to uncover the full truth behind Laura Samuel's murder. The third suspect in the investigation was Kenneth Planters, a 34-year-old personal trainer. Kenneth was known for his confidence and charm. He worked at a popular gym in Sacramento called Fit Life Gym, where he trained clients and participated in competitive sports. Kenneth was supportive of his wife Jessica's free-spirited nature and had participated in the wife swap arrangement with Laura and Carl Samuels. However, Kenneth had become increasingly jealous and suspicious. Detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez brought Kenneth in for questioning on June 19, 2010. Kenneth arrived at the Sacramento Police Department wearing a Fit Life Gym t-shirt and jeans. He appeared nervous but tried to remain composed. Detective Johnson began by asking Kenneth about his relationship with Jessica. Kenneth explained that they had been married for 8 years and had a mostly happy marriage. However, he admitted that the wife swap arrangement had caused tension. Kenneth confessed that he had become uncomfortable with the arrangement, as he was developing feelings for Carl Samuels and felt left out. When asked about the night of Laura's murder, Kenneth claimed he was at home with Jessica. He said they had watched a movie, Iron Man 2, which had been released a few weeks earlier, and went to bed early. Kenneth's alibi was the same as Jessica's, but the detectives were skeptical due to the new evidence linking Jessica to the crime. Detective Hernandez questioned Kenneth about his feelings towards Laura. Kenneth stated that he liked Laura and had no reason to harm her. He seemed genuinely upset about Laura's death and insisted he had nothing to do with it. However, his jealousy and discomfort with the wife swap arrangement were noted by the detectives. The detectives then presented Kenneth with the new evidence: the bloody gloves and the smartphone found in Land Park. Kenneth was visibly shocked and denied any knowledge of the items. He insisted that he had no reason to hurt Laura and was being truthful about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Despite his cooperation, Kenneth's weak alibi and growing jealousy made him a suspect. The detectives decided to keep a close eye on him while they continued to investigate Jessica. They believed that Kenneth might have more information about the crime and Jessica's involvement. As the questioning ended, Kenneth was allowed to leave, but was instructed not to leave town. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez were determined to uncover the full truth, knowing that the evidence was leading them closer to solving the case. On June 20, 2010, the Sacramento police made a breakthrough in the Laura Samuels case. After carefully examining all the evidence, they identified Jessica Planters as the murderer. Jessica, a 32-year-old yoga instructor, had developed an unhealthy obsession with Carl Samuels, Laura's husband. Jessica believed that if Laura were out of the picture, Carl would be with her. The detectives pieced together how Jessica went about killing Laura. On the night of June 13, 2010, Jessica had gone to the Samuels home. She knew Carl would be working late, and Laura would be alone. Using a hairbrush, she brutally beat Laura, ensuring there was no noise to alert the neighbors. Jessica then staged the scene to look like a struggle, hoping it would mislead the police. Jessica's motive was her deep obsession with Carl and her desire to replace Laura in his life. She thought eliminating Laura would make Carl choose her. Additionally, she wanted to frame her own husband, Kenneth, for the murder, ensuring both her romantic rival and unsatisfactory husband were out of the picture. On June 20, around 2:00 p.m., Detective Patricia Johnson and Detective Mark Hernandez went to Jessica's home to arrest her. The sky was overcast, reflecting the somber mood. Jessica was taken by surprise. She had been teaching a yoga class at Zen Flow Yoga when the detectives arrived. When they informed her of the arrest, Jessica initially tried to maintain her composure but soon broke down, crying and pleading her innocence. The police handcuffed Jessica and escorted her out of the studio. The news spread quickly, and local media, including KCRA3 and Fox 40, covered the arrest. The community was shocked as they watched Jessica, a once-admired yoga instructor, being taken away by the police. Laura's family reacted with a mix of relief and sorrow upon hearing of Jessica's arrest. Carl Samuels was devastated by the betrayal, realizing that someone he knew and trusted was responsible for his wife's death. He struggled to come to terms with the loss and the horrific manner in which it happened. Laura's children, Ponderosa and Velveeta, were too young to fully understand, but they sensed the gravity of the situation. As Jessica was taken to the Sacramento Police Department, the detectives felt a sense of accomplishment. They had successfully identified and apprehended the person responsible for Laura's brutal murder. However, they knew the case was far from over as they prepared for the upcoming trial. The trial of Jessica Planters began on September 15, 2010, in the Sacramento County Courthouse. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Lisa Kamabakuro, a 45-year-old known for her sharp legal mind and strong courtroom presence, presented a compelling case against Jessica. Kamabakuro argued that Jessica's obsession with Carl Samuels and her desire to eliminate Laura as a rival drove her to commit the murder. She detailed the evidence, including the bloody gloves and the smartphone found in Land Park, which connected Jessica to the crime scene. On the defense side, attorney Michael Rachmanoff, a 50-year-old with a reputation for taking on challenging cases, argued that Jessica was innocent and framed by someone else. Rachmanoff claimed that there was no direct evidence linking Jessica to the murder and that the police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects, including Kenneth Planters. He also suggested that the DNA evidence on the gloves could have been planted. During the trial, Laura Samuels' family sat in the courtroom, watching with heavy hearts. Carl Samuels, Laura's husband, appeared distraught, often holding back tears. Their children, Ponderosa and Velveeta, were not present, as they were too young to witness the trial's emotional intensity. Friends and community members who knew Laura described her as a loving mother and a dedicated professional, making the crime even more heartbreaking. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On September 25, 2010, they returned with a verdict. Jessica Planters was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with a mix of relief and sorrow as the judge announced the verdict. Jessica showed little emotion, maintaining a stoic expression. Her plan to eliminate Laura and freeing Kenneth had failed, and she now faced the consequences of her actions. During the sentencing phase, Laura's family members gave emotional statements. Carl spoke about the devastating impact of losing Laura and how it had affected their children. The judge sentenced Jessica Planters to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was seen as just by Laura's family, but it could never fully heal the pain of their loss. The verdict in sentencing had a profound effect on everyone involved. Laura's family felt a sense of closure, knowing that justice had been served. The community, shocked by the crime, began to heal, though the memory of Laura's tragic death lingered. Jessica's conviction sent a message that such a calculated and violent act would not go unpunished. As the trial concluded, those who knew Laura hoped to remember her for the vibrant and loving person she was, rather than the brutal way she was taken from them. After the trial, life slowly began to move on for everyone involved in the case. Carl Samuels, now a single father, focused on caring for his children, Ponderosa and Velveeta. He decided to move out of their Sacramento home, seeking a fresh start. They relocated to a smaller town nearby, where they could begin healing away from the painful memories. Carl took a leave of absence from his job at TechWave to spend more time with his children. He enrolled them in a new school and joined a support group for grieving spouses, finding solace in talking to others who had experienced similar losses. He also sought therapy for both himself and his children to help them cope with the trauma of losing Laura. Jessica Planters, now serving a like sentence without the possibility of parole, was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. In prison, she became isolated, with few visitors and little contact with the outside world. Her obsession with Carl and her misguided actions had led her to a life behind bars, far from the free-spirited yoga instructor she once was. Kenneth Planters, Jessica's husband, struggled to rebuild his life. He left Sacramento and moved to San Francisco, where he found a new job as a personal trainer at a different gym. He sought counseling to deal with his feelings of betrayal and confusion. Kenneth tried to move forward but remained deeply affected by the events and the realization that his wife was capable of such violence. In the years following the trial, those touched by Laura's life and tragic death worked to find peace and healing. While the pain of her loss remained, they found ways to move forward, carrying Laura's memory with them and striving to live their lives with the same warmth and determination she had shown. In late July 2017, this is the story of Carolyn Stevens, a dedicated pediatric nurse whose life was cut short by a sinister plot involving her husband and their foster daughter. Carolyn Stevens was a 52-year-old pediatric nurse who lived in Corvallis, Oregon. Known for her kind heart and dedication to her work, Caroline was a beloved figure in her community. She had a special gift for connecting with children, something that made her a standout nurse at the local hospital, Good Samaritan Regional Medical Center. Caroline's colleagues often spoke about her compassion and patience. She was the nurse who would stay late to comfort a scared child or to talk with worried parents. Caroline had a unique perspective on life. As a former foster child, she knew the struggles that many children faced. This personal history drove her to help others, especially children and teens in the foster care system. She was actively involved in community programs and often volunteered at local shelters. Caroline's friends described her as nurturing and empathetic, always willing to lend a helping hand. Her home was often filled with laughter and the smell of homemade cookies, a testament to her love for baking. Caroline was married to Dr. Oliver Stevens, an entomologist at Oregon State University. They had been married for over 20 years and were well known in the community. They had no biological children, but they had fostered several over the years. Their most recent foster child was Charmin Briscoe, who had turned 18 just a few months before Caroline's death. Caroline was very close to Charmin, treating her as her own daughter and supporting her plans to attend Oregon State in the fall. In the days leading up to her death, Caroline was busy with her usual activities. She had just organized a small charity event at her church, St. Mary's Catholic Church, where she was a devoted member. Her friends recalled how excited she was about an upcoming summer picnic planned for the children in her care program. Caroline's diary entries from this time reflected her joy and anticipation for the future. She wrote about her dreams of continuing her work with children and perhaps even starting a small nonprofit organization dedicated to helping foster kids. Caroline's life was a beacon of hope and kindness, making her tragic end all the more shocking and mysterious for everyone who knew her. It was late at night on July 29, 2017, when the peaceful town of Corvallis was jolted by a horrifying discovery. Caroline Stevens' body was found in the backyard of her home. The time was around 10:30 p.m. The person who found her was a neighbor, Lisa Turner. Lisa had come over to return a casserole dish she had borrowed earlier in the week. As she approached the house, she noticed the back gate was open, which was unusual. Lisa decided to check if everything was all right. She walked into the backyard and found Caroline lying on the ground motionless. Caroline's body was partially hidden by the tall garden plants she had lovingly tended. Lisa's first reaction was shock. She dropped the dish and screamed, her voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. She quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking as she tried to explain what she had found. The emergency operator calmed Lisa down and got the necessary details. Lisa described how Caroline looked. She was covered in dirt and there was a rope around her neck. The operator assured Lisa that help was on the way and advised her to stay where she was but not to touch anything. Lisa, still in shock, sat on the back steps, trying to process what she had just seen. When the police and paramedics arrived, they found Lisa visibly shaken but able to give a statement. Officer Joey Martins, one of the first on the scene, described Lisa as pale and trembling, her voice barely a whisper as she recounted the events. The backyard was quickly cordoned off with yellow police tape as investigators began their work. Caroline's body was carefully examined. The medical examiner, Dr. Susan Ng, noted the severe head injuries and the strangulation marks on Caroline's neck. She confirmed that Caroline had been bludgeoned with a tire iron and then strangled with a rope. The scene was gruesome, with blood spatters on the garden pathway and the tire iron lying nearby, partially hidden under a bush. News of the murder spread quickly through Corvallis. People were shocked that something so terrible could happen in their quiet town. Friends and family gathered outside the Stevens home, comforting each other and trying to make sense of the tragedy. Caroline's death was a harsh blow to the community. She was a beloved figure, and the brutality of her murder left everyone in a state of disbelief and fear. The police promised to find out who was responsible for this heinous crime and bring them to justice. The police arrived quickly at the Stevens home on July 29, 2017. By 11 o'clock p.m., the quiet neighborhood of Corvallis was buzzing with activity. Officer Joey Martinez, along with Detective Linda Salina and Detective Mike Prosper, led the investigation. They were known for their thoroughness and dedication. Detective Salina, a 10-year veteran of the force, was especially known for her keen eye for detail. Detective Prosper, her partner, was equally experienced and meticulous. The crime scene was a mess. Caroline Stevens' body lay in the backyard, surrounded by her garden plants. Blood was splattered on the garden pathway, and a tire iron lay nearby, partially hidden under a bush. The rope around Caroline's neck was still tightly wound. The detectives immediately began to secure the area, putting up yellow police tape to keep curious neighbors and onlookers at a distance. Detective Salina took the lead in examining the body. She noted the severe head injuries and the clear marks of strangulation on Caroline's neck. It was evident that Caroline had been bludgeoned with the tire iron and then strangled with the rope. The brutality of the crime was shocking. Detective Salina carefully documented the scene, taking photographs and making notes. Detective Prosper focused on gathering evidence from the surrounding area. He collected the tire iron and bagged it for forensic analysis. He also took samples of the blood spatter and examined the rope for any potential clues. The backyard was meticulously combed for any signs that might point to the murderer. As the investigation continued, the police used various tools and methods to gather evidence. They brought in a forensic team to dust for fingerprints and collect DNA samples. The tire iron was sent to the lab for analysis to determine if it had any fingerprints or other trace evidence. The rope was also examined for fibers or hairs that might help identify the killer. By the early hours of July 30, the police had gathered a significant amount of evidence from the crime scene. Detective Salina and Detective Prosper reviewed their findings and began to piece together the events that led to Caroline's murder. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, and they knew they had to act quickly to find the murderer before they could strike again. The investigation was just beginning, but the detectives were determined to solve the case and bring justice for Caroline Stevens. The peaceful town of Corvallis was now the center of a major murder investigation, and the police were ready to uncover the truth. The first suspect the police investigated was Dr. Oliver Stevens, Caroline's husband. Dr. Stevens, 55, was an entomologist at Oregon State University. He studied insects and was well known in his field. To the outside world, he seemed like a mild-mannered and hardworking man. However, some in the community found him creepy. Oliver had a reputation for being distant and socially awkward. When the police arrived at Oliver's workplace to question him, he was in his lab working late as usual. He seemed calm and cooperative. Oliver told the police he had been at work all day and only came home late in the evening. He claimed to have found the house empty and assumed Caroline was out visiting friends. Oliver's alibi was that he had been at the university the entire time, with colleagues who could confirm his presence. Detectives Selena and Prosper interviewed Oliver in the small, cluttered office at the university. Oliver appeared calm but showed little emotion when discussing his wife's death. He described his relationship with Caroline as good and normal. However, the detectives noticed that he avoided making direct eye contact and seemed uncomfortable when they asked about his personal life. The police were particularly interested in Oliver's recent behavior. They discovered that Oliver had married Charmin Briscoe, their former foster daughter, in a small ceremony just 6 days after Caroline's death. This raised so many red flags. Marrying so soon after his wife's brutal murder seemed extremely suspicious and definitely earned him the title of creepiest man in Oregon. Oliver calmly explained that he and Charmin had developed feelings for each other over time, and that the marriage was their way to move forward after Caroline's death. The police pressed Oliver on this point, asking if Caroline knew about his relationship with Charmin. Oliver admitted that Caroline had recently become suspicious and had confronted him about it. He claimed that they had argued but insisted he had nothing to do with her death. Oliver's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he became visibly nervous when discussing his relationship with Charmin. Detective Selena found Oliver's behavior odd. Marrying so quickly after Caroline's death and his nervousness during the interrogation made him a prime suspect. However, they needed more evidence to link him directly to the murder. They decided to keep a close eye on him and continued to investigate other leads. As the investigation progressed, the detectives hoped to find more clues that would either confirm or dispel their suspicions about Dr. Oliver Stevens. His unusual behavior and rapid remarriage made him a key figure in the case, and the police were determined to uncover the truth. The second suspect the police investigated was Charmin Briscoe, the Stevens' former foster daughter and also Oliver Stevens' new wife. Charmin was 18 years old and had lived with Caroline and Oliver since she was 17. She had a troubled past, growing up with a violent alcoholic father. Despite these hardships, Charmin was an academically gifted student and had plans to attend Oregon State University in the fall. The police found Charmin packing up the small apartment that Oliver and Caroline had rented for her when she turned 18. Detective Linda Selena and Detective Mike Prosper visited her there to ask questions about Caroline's death. Charmin was quiet and reserved during the interview, traits her teachers and peers often mentioned. She appeared deeply affected by the events, but her answers were calm and straightforward. Charmin told the detectives about her relationship with Caroline, describing her as a kind and loving mother figure. She said Caroline had always supported her, especially in her academic pursuits. When asked about Oliver, Charmin admitted that they had developed feelings for each other and that Oliver had treated her to a lavish dinner at a fancy restaurant for her 18th birthday. It was during this dinner that Oliver confessed his love for her and said Caroline was just a nuisance. The police found it unusual that Charmin married Oliver just days after Caroline's death. Charmin explained that they were in love and wanted to move on with their lives. She insisted she had no involvement in Caroline's murder and that she had been at home studying on the night of the crime. Her alibi was that she had spent the evening alone, preparing for her upcoming university courses. Detective Selena noticed that Charmin's answers were consistent but sensed a lingering fear in her demeanor. Charmin seemed genuinely saddened by Caroline's death, but also appeared to be hiding something. The detectives asked Charmin about her thoughts on Oliver's behavior after Caroline's death. Charmin hesitated but then said Oliver had been supportive and caring, helping her through the difficult time. The police also asked Charmin if Caroline knew about her relationship with Oliver. Charmin said that Caroline had suspected something but had not confronted her directly. This information, combined with a rapid marriage, made Charmin a person of interest. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, the detectives had to consider other possibilities. As the interview concluded, the police remained cautious about Charmin's involvement. Her relationship with Oliver and her proximity to the Stevens family made her a key figure in the investigation. The detectives decided to monitor her closely while continuing to gather more information. The investigation into Charmin Briscoe's role in the case was ongoing. with detectives looking for any clues that could either confirm or disprove her involvement in Caroline Stevens' murder. The third suspect the police investigated was Samuel Manjaro, a 43-year-old refugee from South Sudan. Samuel had moved to America with his 4 children after losing his wife during the Civil War. He found work as a janitor and rented a small apartment in Corvallis. Samuel's connection to the Stevens family came from a dispute with Dr. Oliver Stevens, who was his former landlord. Samuel had been evicted from his apartment by Dr. Stevens just a month before Caroline's death. Oliver had given Samuel and his family very little notice, making room for Charmin Briscoe to live there rent-free. This eviction left Samuel and his children homeless for a short period, which caused him significant distress. The police considered Samuel a suspect because he had a motive for holding a grudge against Oliver. Detectives Linda Salina and Mike Prosper went to interview Samuel at his new apartment. Samuel was cooperative but visibly upset about the eviction. He spoke about the challenges of starting a new life in America and the hardship caused by losing his apartment. Samuel described how difficult it had been to find a new place to live while trying to keep his job and take care of his children. During the interview, Samuel appeared calm but frustrated when discussing Dr. Stevens. He admitted he was angry about the eviction but denied any involvement in Caroline's murder. Samuel explained that on the night of the murder, he was at work. His employer confirmed that Samuel had been working his usual night shift as a janitor at a local office building. The police checked Samuel's alibi and found it to be solid. His time card showed he had clocked in and out at the correct times, and security footage confirmed his presence at the building throughout the night. Despite his anger towards Oliver, there was no evidence linking Samuel to the crime scene. Detective Salina noticed that Samuel's main concern was the well-being of his children. He talked about how they were adjusting to life in Corvallis and his hopes for their future. Samuel was a hard-working man trying to provide for his family under challenging circumstances. His focus on his children and his solid alibi made it less likely that he was involved in Caroline's murder. After interviewing Samuel, the detectives concluded that while he had a motive to dislike Oliver, there was no direct evidence tying him to the crime. They decided to keep Samuel in mind, but turned their attention back to other leads that might provide more substantial clues. As the investigation continued, the police were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Caroline Stevens. Samuel Manjaro remained a person of interest, but the focus shifted back to the Stevens family and their complex relationships. On August 5, 2017, a week after Caroline Stevens' murder, the police received a crucial piece of new evidence. It was a hot and sunny afternoon when Detective Linda Salina got a call from the forensic lab. The lab had analyzed the tire iron found at the crime scene and discovered fingerprints that didn't belong to Caroline or Oliver. These fingerprints belonged to Charmin Briscoe. The police immediately revisited the Stevens home to gather more evidence. This time, they brought in a specialized team to search for anything that might have been overlooked. Detective Mike Prosper led the team, and they meticulously combed through the house and backyard. They focused on areas where Charmin might have left traces of her presence. During the search, they found a hidden compartment in the garage. Inside, there were several personal items belonging to Charmin, including a notebook. This notebook contained detailed entries about her sexual relationship with Oliver and her growing frustration with Caroline. One entry, dated just days before the murder, expressed anger towards Caroline for being a nasty bleep and mentioned a plan to make that bleep pay. The notebook was a significant find. It provided a direct link between Charmin and the murder. The police also found a pair of gloves in Charmin's apartment, which tested positive for traces of Caroline's blood. This evidence suggested that Charmin had worn the gloves while handling the tire iron, which explained why her fingerprints were only found on the weapon and not at the crime scene. With this new evidence, the police called Charmin in for another round of questioning. This time, they confronted her with the notebook and the blood-stained gloves. Charmin's demeanor changed drastically. She became visibly nervous and struggled to maintain her composure. She initially denied any involvement, but the mounting evidence made it difficult for her to keep her story straight. Charmin eventually broke down and confessed to being present at the crime scene, but insisted that Oliver was the one who had killed Caroline. She claimed that she had tried to stop him, but was too scared to report the crime. Charmin's confession added a new layer to the investigation, indicating that Oliver and Charmin might have been co-conspirators. The police reviewed Charmin's confession and the new evidence carefully. They realized that while Charmin's involvement was now clear, they still needed to determine Oliver's exact role in the murder. The focus of the investigation shifted to proving Oliver's participation and understanding the full extent of their plan. As the investigation progressed, the police were more determined than ever to bring justice for Caroline Stevens. The new evidence provided a clearer picture of what had happened, but the case was far from over. The detectives knew they had to keep pushing to uncover the whole truth. On August 10, 2017, the police felt they had enough evidence to arrest Dr. Oliver Stevens for the murder of his wife, Caroline. Dr. Stevens, 55, was a respected entomologist at Oregon State University, but behind his professional facade, he harbored dark secrets. Oliver had married Charmin Briscoe, their former foster daughter, just 6 days after Caroline's brutal murder, raising many suspicions. Detectives Linda Selena and Mike Prosper reviewed the new evidence carefully. Charmin's confession, the blood-stained gloves, and the notebook entries all pointed towards a conspiracy between Oliver and Charmin. They believed that Oliver orchestrated the murder to be with Charmin without any obstacles. Caroline had recently become suspicious of Oliver's behavior, which likely pushed him to act. On the morning of August 11, the police planned the arrest. They knew Oliver was teaching a class at the university, so they decided to confront him there. At 10:00 a.m., Detectives Selena and Prosper arrived at the campus. They waited outside his lecture hall until he finished his class. As Oliver exited the room, the detectives approached him, identified themselves, and informed him that he was under arrest for the murder of Caroline Stevens. Oliver's reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. He tried to maintain his composure but couldn't hide his surprise. The students and faculty nearby were equally shocked as they watched the arrest unfold. The detectives handcuffed Oliver and read him his rights. He was then escorted to the police car, maintaining a stoic expression throughout the process. Back at the police station, Oliver was formally charged with first-degree murder. During the interrogation, he continued to deny his involvement, claiming that Charmin had acted alone. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The notebook entries, Charmin's confession, and the forensic evidence all painted a clear picture of his guilt. The police believed that Oliver had manipulated Charmin into helping him with his plan, using her troubled past and emotional attachment to him. The detectives continued to piece together the events leading up to the murder. They learned that Oliver had meticulously planned the crime, ensuring that Charmin would have an alibi and that evidence would point away from him initially. His cold and calculated approach made the crime even more chilling. With Oliver in custody, the police shifted their focus to preparing for the upcoming trial. They were determined to ensure that both Oliver and Charmin would face the consequences of their actions. The arrest was a significant step towards justice for Caroline Stevens, but the case was far from over. The trial for the murder of Caroline Stevens began on November 15, 2017. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and members of Caroline's family. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Margaret Ellis, 45, presented a strong case against Dr. Oliver Stevens. Margaret was known for her meticulous approach and her passion for seeking justice. She argued that Oliver had orchestrated the murder to be with Charmin Briscoe, their former foster daughter, without any obstacles. The prosecution laid out the evidence in a clear and compelling manner. They presented the notebook entries written by Charmin, which detailed her frustrations with Caroline and hinted at a plan to make that bleep pay. They also showed the blood-stained gloves found in Charmin's apartment and the forensic analysis that linked them to Caroline's murder. Margaret emphasized Oliver's quick marriage to Charmin just days after the murder, portraying it as proof of his motive. The defense, led by attorney Jonathan Ray, 50, faced an uphill battle. Jonathan was a seasoned lawyer known for his calm demeanor and strategic thinking. He argued that Charmin acted alone out of jealousy and that Oliver had no part in the crime. The defense attempted to discredit Charmin's confession, suggesting that she had been coerced by the police. Jonathan also tried to cast doubt on the forensic evidence, claiming that it was circumstantial and did not directly link Oliver to the murder. Caroline's family watched the trial with a mix of grief and determination. Her brother, David Miller, often spoke to reporters during breaks, expressing hope that justice would be served. The emotional toll on the family was evident as they listened to the details of Caroline's brutal death. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On December 10, 2017, they returned with a verdict. Oliver Stevens was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Oliver remained stoic, showing little reaction. Charmin, who was also present, broke down in tears. The judge sentenced Oliver to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The severity of the sentence reflected the heinous nature of the crime and the premeditation involved. Charmin received a lighter sentence of 25 years for her role in the murder, acknowledging her cooperation with the police. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Caroline's family, though the pain of her loss remained. They felt justice had been served, but the memories of Caroline would always linger. The community of Corvallis was shocked by the events, but many were relieved that the case had been resolved. The trial and its outcome had a profound impact on those involved. Caroline's friends and family found some solace in the verdict, while Oliver and Charmin faced the consequences of their actions. The story of Carolyn Stevens' murder served as a reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the importance of seeking justice. After the trial, life in Corvallis began to settle into a new normal, though the impact of the case lingered for everyone involved. Dr. Oliver Stevens was serving his life sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary. The prison, located in Salem, became his new home, where he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Oliver's former colleagues and students at Oregon State University were shocked and saddened by his conviction. The university had to manage the fallout from the scandal, including addressing concerns from students and faculty about their safety and the integrity of their institution. Charmin Briscoe, sentenced to 25 years, was transferred to the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, a women's prison near Wilsonville. Charmin's life in prison was difficult. She faced challenges adapting to her new environment and had to cope with the consequences of her actions. The media continued to follow her story, and she became a figure of public interest, often highlighted in local news reports. For the Stevens friends and supporters, the case became a rallying point for greater awareness and support for victims of crime. Various memorials and events were held in Caroline's honor, helping to keep her memory alive and ensure that her legacy of compassion and service continued. As time went on, life in Corvallis gradually returned to its normal pace, but the story of Caroline Stevens and the dramatic events surrounding her murder remained a significant part of the town's history. The trial and its outcome served as a stark reminder of the importance of justice and the impact of crime on individuals and communities alike.